war is eternal, as inevitable as the grave. The old world, the rotting corpse within. Some fools think it's worth saving, but there are beings who wish to bring about an eternal night. The mighty vampire counts of the von Carstein bloodline.
That's us. We're the mighty counts.
We're the von Carsteins now, baby.
There's new management in town, and it's getting stinky up in here.
Listen, the old man, Mannfred von Carstein, he just went down south. He's fucking around in the desert, and he's left Castle... I don't remember its original name because we kept renaming it.
Yeah, it's GoldCastlePartyTown.
Yeah, GoldCastlePartyTown, that it has now been christened as our new head capital of the vampiric empire that we have built among the remains of the old world. Welcome, everybody. We've just revealed what campaign that we've played.
Oh, yeah. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen and other, to a very special episode of The List Goes On, our premiere podcast. I know I say it's special every time, but this one actually kind of is.
Yeah.
Because how many episodes are we in now, Connor? This is 8, right?
This is the 8th episode.
And we finally pulled the emergency alarm. Oh no, we've got to do Warhammer now.
Well, that's the thing. I don't see this as an emergency. And if anything, we've roughly tried to play these games in order of when we played them chronologically. And we
have failed.
We have failed. But if we did commit to that fully, Total War would actually be the 8th game.
Really?
Yeah.
God.
Back in 2020. However, those of you who are reading the title of this podcast will realise that it says Total Warhammer 3. And that is because this is one of the first games on the list that we revisited several years later.
Yes, so...
not just for the podcast either.
Not just for the podcast, no. We replayed this game a few times, actually, just because we enjoyed playing it so much. It was a lot of fun for both of us. It was really engaging, and it felt like we were making decisions and looking over this little map that we were making.
Yeah. This
has been one of my favourite games on the list so far. Not to kind of spoil the rankings, but I really, really enjoyed this game.
Yeah. It warms my heart to hear it as well, because I've, especially around my sort of friendship circle and a lot of people I've grown up with, I've usually been the one guy that likes strategy.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I was thinking about when thinking about the recording of this podcast was to say that I've known you for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
I believe 16 years by my count at this point.
At this point, yeah.
Yeah, something around there. And I think one of the most consistent through lines throughout that entire period has been both Warhammer and strategy games.
Yes.
And that's something that's remained part of your interests that entire time. So to engage in it is really, really satisfying in that way.
Oh, it really was. In fact, I was thinking about this a little while ago, which is that around the time that we first met was around the time that I tried to distance myself from those things, just because for one reason or another, I think I was probably getting teased for it.
Yeah.
And also, Warhammer as a hobby is very expensive, and I just couldn't maintain that. It was something that kind of reflourished, but one thing that always stuck around was my love for those things. I couldn't part ways with it.
Yeah.
I would play Dawn of War on and off constantly. I think there's my retrospective of Dark Crusade, I put a little graphic up saying, I've played lots of Dark Crusade, and I show a calendar of about 15 years, and I colour in all the times I played Dark Crusade, which isn't 100% accurate, but that was me trying to predict how much
It very least gives you the impression of how much you care for these games, and how much they've kind of occupied your youth over your entire life, I suppose, at this point.
Yeah, pretty much. Although it's funny, Total War is one of the biggest strategy games that are out there. In that,
I've heard of it, so
yeah,
that must be good.
And especially, it's one of the few that has kept going because RTS just has not
been doing super hard recently.
But it's still a series that I've not been fully committed to playing. There's several of the games I've yet to touch.
Yeah, I always took you for more of a Age of Empires kind of guy when I thought about your interest in these kind of games.
Yeah, I mean, Age of Empires is in my top 10.
Yeah. The first one?
The second one. Yeah, Age of Empires 1 is fun, but...
There's been 4, right?
Yeah.
Not counting spin-offs?
Not counting spin-offs, Age of Mythology is a thing. That one's cool, but... Yeah, Age of Empires is normally more my vibe, but Total War is still so much fun. As a kid, I loved playing medieval Total War, and then as I was growing up as well, I was trying Rome and Shogun, and... finding out that there was going to be a Warhammer Total War was like a match made in heaven for me.
I was thinking about this because obviously it does seem on the surface to be an incredibly fortuitous matching of IP. But Total War Warhammer 1 came out in 2016, is that correct?
It did, yeah.
I'm trying to think where you were at that time and if Warhammer was really as big a thing for you. Because I remember we used to have all these conversations where you were like, am I really that into Warhammer anymore? Am I still into the setting? It's also it's fantasy Warhammer as well, which I know isn't quite your your cart and horse, basically, sometimes.
Yeah. Despite the names, it's an entirely different IP. Some would even argue that despite them both having a relatively bleak sort of theming, they are very different tonally.
Yeah.
One guy I know in particular, he's kind of sick of the grimdark of 40k, but he still loves the old world because Warhammer Fantasy still has avenues for good people to be good people and to impact the world. There's probably a much more in-depth discussion to be had about it, but it's things like...
Just from my perspective, I think I found the stylings and fashion of the fantasy Warhammer as experience in this game to be much more appealing than whatever I've seen of the science fiction stuff. Just because the science fiction stuff just goes so hard with the grimness, and it doesn't feel like any happiness can exist in that world, and that doesn't really interest me.
That's fair. That's the thing. That's something to, I think, my audience isn't that aware of, is that, a lot of my kind of social circle in real life isn't so dedicated to Warhammer.
I was going to say that just as your dedication or your interest in Warhammer has remained consistent over the past 16 years, my total aversion to it has also remained starkly consistent. I think the extent of my interest in Warhammer was listening to you talk about it, watching some of your videos, and then you telling me really stupid things about the lore that got on my nerves. Like the story of this guy who jumped in front of the Emperor and exploded. I don't know. We were in a forest at the time.
I fondly remember I was talking about Alania's Pious while going through fucking Mousehold Heath.
Mousehold Heath, which is a shit-ass little forest in the middle of Norwich, which is not impressive at all.
I love Mousehold Heath, but...
we all love Mousehold Heath, but it sucks. Let's have no bones about it. It's kind of a dump, but we all like it.
But there is quite a lot to say about this game. I'm sure people are itching to learn about. But yeah, in terms of personal history and stuff...
so we did 2 different campaigns across 2 different games.
Yeah.
Hence why we keep talking about Warhammer 2, even though the title of this will say Warhammer 3, I presume.
Yeah. Which, to be fair, at this point, Warhammer 3 is now the one we've spent the most time on.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
But I suppose what I do want to kind of get into to start things off is to just talk briefly about kind of why this game came to be. Because an idea I've often subscribed to is that when you make adaptations of the Warhammer IP, it brings new people into the setting.
Yeah.
I say this as someone that was brought to Warhammer 40k through Dawn of War, pretty much.
And I would say that this is the closest I've come to having an interest in that setting. From this game alone, basically. Yeah,
which happens to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And the thing with that is that it seems like Total War is just a really good marriage with Warhammer Fantasy to get people involved with it. However, this game got announced in 2014, which...
God, all those years ago, huh?
Yeah.
You and I were playing Mario Kart every day.
We were, yeah, that was the thing. Because what was going on in the world of Warhammer Fantasy was absolutely apocalyptic.
Was this Age of Sigmar stuff? Or...
Yeah. This was when...
Those are the words I know.
Yeah. Warhammer Fantasy was going through its end times, literally and narratively.
Yeah.
In that Games Workshop were actually discontinuing Warhammer Fantasy. Warhammer Fantasy has been in a bit of an odd place. There were a lot of people that got very tired of the way that the meta evolved in it. But also, the Lord of the Rings tabletop line that Games Workshop was also making was outperforming Fantasy, and Fantasy was meant to be one of Games Workshop's big flagship franchises.
Warhammer Fantasy, is that the original?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's their thing, right? That's like Mario not doing well. That's our original, that's what made us big. This is important to us.
Exactly, yeah. So they were scrambling to see what they could do, and the strategy for Games Workshop around that time was, okay, what if we just make a smaller scale thing? We want to take away the grand strategy of all of these big empires, all these expensive models that we have to print and sell.
We're also going to license the IP to every single game studio who asks, apparently.
Yes, just hoping that it will draw more people in. But it didn't work out. They wrote their end times plotline, which...
Oh, so were they trying to do things with the original setting before Age of Sigmar, making small adjustments rather than remaking the whole thing for a while?
Well, they kind of did in releasing new editions.
Okay.
But the end times was them basically saying, okay, we're giving a narrative reason to reboot this.
Yeah.
The end times...
It's a real A Realm Reborn, Final Fantasy XIV type situation.
Exactly. Although, I will say the end times is... I would say universally reviled by people who like Warhammer Fantasy, not just because it's ending Warhammer Fantasy. A lot of people were kind of cool with the idea of, Chaos ends up taking over the world. That could be interesting, rather than the Warhammer narratives being a constant back and forth of Armageddon is coming, the big bad's coming up, the heroes beat them. sure,
Yeah,
that can happen.
Whatever. That's just how it goes sometimes.
It's more that the way it's depicted is pretty much, I suppose people would call it an idiot plot.
Right. Yeah. It's like being stretched beyond believability at a certain point, where it's like, you guys should know better than this.
There's more than one occasion where the heroes are just about to win, and one guy just goes, "Nah, I'm gonna be selfish."
Yeah.
And just fucks it over for everyone else. But
so like every era ends with an Asylador.
Yeah.
Just like, come on, guys, like learn our lesson.
Yeah,
like...
that's a good way of putting it. It is an Asylador from Lord of the Rings. But as a result, they made Age of Sigmar. But the thing is they did the end times, and then after they had done this, after they were putting Age of Sigmar out there, they announced Total War Warhammer.
And is that set within the pre-Age of Sigmar fantasy setting?
Yeah, that's Warhammer Fantasy, the old world, which baffles me, because if they had waited a couple of years, I guarantee you, because it did happen, Total War would have brought people to play fantasy.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So instead a bunch of people play Total War, were like, oh sweet, this is based on a miniatures thing. Oh, a lot of the models are discontinued.
Like my version of this world doesn't actually exist anymore. Now I've got to get into the Sigmar nonsense, which might not be the same quality-wise or story-wise as the original stuff.
Yeah. And I also, that's the thing. I don't want to bash Sigmar on this matter because it is...
Yeah, Sigmar's had enough. Come on. Leave Sigmar alone.
Leave Sigmar alone. He's gone through a lot.
He's having a tough time right now.
But it's...
Messy divorce.
Yeah. But it came into its own with some very cool lore and stuff, which I'm glad it didn't just get... It wasn't just there as like a lame replacement.
Wasn't a complete wash.
No, exactly. That's a way to put it. But and that's the thing, is it got to a point where Total War Warhammer was so successful, it not only saved the Warhammer Fantasy IP, because there was a while where Games Workshop were trying to release Fantasy again alongside Warhammer 3, Total Warhammer 3.
Yeah.
But also, I would argue it saved Total War. Because... the background of Total War is primarily a historical series.
Yeah.
Or at least it was. Because, and that's the thing that drew a lot of people towards it. People liked these very authentic ways to simulate feudal Japan, ancient Rome, medieval times.
Because I'm trying to transliterate what I know about Total War Warhammer onto a non-fictional setting like Asia or Europe or things like that.
Yeah.
So is it like you choose a region and then you're trying to conquer other territories? Like, are you like one kingdom of Meiji era Japan trying to take over the entire island or something like that?
Yeah. It's the Total War Shogun is precisely that. You're one of the smaller clans.
Yeah, the warring states trying to unify the entire country. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, was there ever one where it's like you're playing as France and you're trying to take over all of Europe, or is there anything like that?
Yeah. Like Empire Total War was a thing, as well as Napoleon Total War. That's the thing. At that point, Total War started to expand into different time periods and stuff, but they had to become more hyper-specific.
Right. Because the thing I'm thinking about with Warhammer is that the version of the game that we played, as far as I understand it, is a special version where you have the entire world map to conquer.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, is there a version of that in the regular Total War where it's the entire world?
There isn't at this point, unfortunately.
Because that was what was so exciting about it to me, was the fact that there was so much, like it was like you were living in a living, breathing world of all these factions running around and stuff. That was what was impressive about it to me.
Yeah, it wasn't originally the case. Total War Warhammer 2... it's a very clunky name.
Yeah, the fact they didn't call it Total Warhammer is baffling.
Right, it probably would have saved them thousands in printing costs. But
it's probably like a license thing, right? Like you have to have Total War or Warhammer in there. Like you have to have like the full title.
Yeah, I'm imagining a bunch of suits were just throwing paper at each other, being like, "How dare you! I would never mingle with your dirty
Do not
digital
compromise
family.
The integrity of our brand."
Yeah, we make plastic models. We're dignified. But...
You're owned by Sonic. What do you have to show for it?
Yeah, it was Total War in the office. Until eventually they confederated to make this beautiful marriage of Total War Warhammer, which sold super, super well.
Oh yeah, this game seemed to have had like a huge cultural impact as well. Like it seems like this was like massive in terms of not just Warhammer fans or Total War fans, but kind of bringing in new people, like confederating those two fan bases while bringing in a new third group of people who were just like, oh, this seems cool.
Yeah, because a lot of questions kind of go across my mind about why was this so successful, because obviously fans of Warhammer Fantasy were clamoring for a new thing to have that back, but it was a thing of, well, it was 2014 where they announced this, and they were probably developing it beforehand. Why didn't they go for Lord of the Rings? Why didn't they go for Game of Thrones? That was the big monotonous. They went with Warhammer. Something about it drew it to them. I want to say, get ready your bingo cards. I want to say it might be because Creative Assembly and Games Workshop are both British.
Maybe
there was an easier partnership, but
or they were just fans of the IP, right?
Yeah,
like they were enthusiastic about using Warhammer, not because it was like a big IP that would give them lots of sales, but because they liked it, basically.
Yeah. The thing is adapting this series into being a fantasy IP as well required some adjustments from the normal historical stuff, things they got to experiment with, that also ended up entirely revolutionizing the gameplay formula of Total War.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, as a fantasy setting, there's an emphasis on monsters and creatures and powerful mighty heroes who are one-man armies. That influenced every Total War game afterwards.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, the next big game that came out after this was Total War 3 Kingdoms. At least I would say the next big one. People
Isn't
probably
that a Fire Emblem game?
Yeah, right, 3 houses.
Yeah, the Three Kingdoms. Leicester.
Listen, if you got me a Fire Emblem Total War, I would. You wouldn't see me again.
You'd be all over that, yeah.
Yeah,
if you could conquer Marth.
I would kick Marth's shit in. I would take the one kingdom of Valentia, and I would take over the world. But
that would make you so happy.
It really would.
You could command Arm and Celica and make them conquer all the bad Fire Emblem games. Like go invade Hashido or something.
Fuck yeah, why not? Actually put it... Well, that's... You know why they won't do it?
Why?
They would have to try and find an actual name for the place that Fates is set in. And they don't have that.
Oh, that would be too difficult, would it?
Yeah, far too difficult.
Yeah.
But with the introduction of hero units, Three Kingdoms had a big emphasis on it as well. Like, you have Lubu and all of that kind of thing.
Of course you got Lubu.
Yeah.
My boy Lubu. Hell yeah.
And later on, a lot of their other historical ones were things like... Total War Troy, where they put a lot of emphasis on characters like Achilles and Paris and Hector and all of these.
Troy Barnes.
Troy Barnes.
Yeah, he was there.
From Community?
Yeah, he's running around.
Total War Community.
Yeah. You got to invade the study room. It's going to be fantastic.
The Dark Kingdom of Jeff.
Yeah, because like the more fictional elements that are endemic to Warhammer are kind of a lot of the parts of this game that I found the most compelling.
Yeah.
So for reference, both times that we were playing, we played as the vampire faction, as Isabella von Carstein.
Yes.
And this is very key to the development or to understanding the list goes on, is that I was given the choice of who to play as because Connor was introducing me to this game, and I chose the girl faction. I found the faction that had a cute girl and was like, yep, that's my guy.
Yeah, well, there were a few options, and they expanded into 3.
Yeah.
That was the thing. You went for the exact same campaign twice.
I did, yeah. I just like being a vampire. It's so much fun. Because that's the why I'm bringing it up, is because a big part of that campaign is spreading vampiric corruption across the land, and that was like, I would keep zooming out to the overall world map and looking at the corruption and how it was spreading, and that was like, for me, that was the most exciting part, was the fact that I was being able to play as a vampire faction, and I was able to do vampire things like converting people to undead and building armies and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And just like draining the vitae out of the land. And that was what was so exciting about it. More than if it was like, oh, I get to impose taxes on like Brittany now, you know?
Yeah, the flavor of it, I think, was super important to kind of pull you in. I mean, we kept giggling at just how when you expand the vampire settlements, it's like, oh, you go from a murky village to a shady township and all this stuff.
And like you build like charnel pits and like corpse piles, and that defends your town and stuff like that.
If we just played as the Empire, it would have just been town, city. And I think maybe for those of you who aren't familiar with Total War, it might be worth us talking about the gameplay now, because we normally start with plot.
There's not much of a plot in this game.
No.
There's the story of our conquests, but we'll be getting into that, don't you worry.
Yeah, it's more the plot that's there is the background of the Warhammer fantasy setting.
Yeah.
The kind of structure of the game. Bigger fans of fantasy can tell me if I'm wrong here, but it seems like the way they've done it in this game is a lot of the most prominent characters in the setting just kind of all exist in the same time period for this game.
They've kind of had to like smooth over some weird cracks and bumps to make it all work consistently and tonally with one another, because like when you're playing the kind of campaign that Connor and I were playing, there are literally like 275 factions that you have to contend with.
Oh, good grief, yeah.
And they are all like, a lot of them are just different variants of the same kind of race or the same kind of a kind of army, but there are still so many variables at play here. Like, we only really saw maybe like a fifth of the entire world and the entire armies that we were facing.
Yeah, since we picked the same campaign twice, we were primarily focused on the old world, but that's not really even a detriment to that decision making, because so many people that I've spoken to online have said, wow, finally, Total Warhammer 3 has come out. I can play as all of these factions. I can go to these incredible places. Time to do another Empire campaign and stay in the exact same part of the world.
So I kind of feel, before we get into the nuts and bolts of the actual game, I kind of want to talk about the context in which we found ourselves playing Total Warhammer.
Oh, fair, yeah.
Because it was kind of irregular. Yeah. Like, I'm trying to remember the specifics of it, but basically we weren't This game was never specifically on the list.
No.
We just kind of... I remember Connor was telling me stories about Total Warhammer and what he had done in it and the kind of things that he had experienced. And he said something along the lines of, there's a mode in which you are basically playing with every single faction on the world map all at one time, and it creates these incredible little micro stories and this great, like, dynamic, emergent narrative of your conquest, and it can go all these different ways.
Yeah.
And I think to me it sounded completely enchanting. Like, it was so compelling. I was like, that sounds incredible. Can we play this game? Like, it's not a part of our list. It's not really conducive to the kind of game that we usually play because it's quite long.
Yeah.
But I want to have a go at this. Can I try it? And I think I was just at your house one day and I was like, should we just play Warhammer?
Yeah.
And we just agreed to do that.
Yeah, I think that is how it went, because it wasn't related to just doing anything list related.
Because I'm trying to think what era of the list it would have been. And it would have been when we were being intermittently interrupted by COVID restrictions, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, this was our second to last game before we got locked down for a third time.
Yeah.
Second time.
Second time.
Which was a damn shame. I think that kind of might have been what killed the run. We would have kept going with it. But
because there was no space for it. Like, that was the thing, is that we weren't doing it. I'm not sure if we were expecting to even be playing it for that long. We thought we would just have a quick go on it and then move on, but we ended up having so much fun that we kept wanting to come back to it.
Yeah.
Including years later when we returned to Warhammer 3 to do another run. You know?
Yeah. Because this was in the October of 2020. So playing as the vampire counts was appropriately Halloweenish, I think, as well.
They have great vibes. Like, they're so malevolent and evil, and all their factions are like horrible skeletons and ghouls and bats, and it's like... That really helped me get into it, because it was just so much fun spreading this vampiric influence across the provinces of the world and initiating diplomacy with other faction states and being like, welcome to my evil lair. Would you like 50 gold? Like, that was a huge part of it for me.
Yeah, I suppose for starters, we're talking about how investing the Mortal Empires campaign is, which is when you have all the factions on the world map. But when the game originally launched, it launched with 5 factions. Yeah. Technically 6, but one of them was entirely unplayable at first, and a 5th one that was like day 1 DLC. And it was so much smaller, a lot more constrained, and I think... despite it getting rave reviews, it was so bare. Like,
it's a very different game.
Yeah, no one goes back to Total War Warhammer now. Yeah, the first one. They always play 2 or 3.
Well, I remember the thing is that I would keep badgering you about us playing Total War Warhammer 3, and you would say no, it's not ready yet. Yeah, but they haven't put in the world map yet. You have to wait for that to be added in later. Yeah,
well, because we could have gone back to 2. Or we could have, but it just felt redundant since the next big map was on the horizon.
Yeah.
Because otherwise we would have to play a campaign mode, which is absolutely fine. It's got its own appeal.
I don't know. That doesn't speak to me. Like, no. To me, the whole thing is having so many factions that play at once. Like, having that entire world, having a total war. I want a total war, not a specialized war. I want to fight everyone.
Yeah. That's something I've always noticed whenever I've done the main campaign mode, is that I've typically... The main plot line is to have a specific objective, but I don't care. That's not why I'm wanting to do it.
Yeah, I want to set my own objectives. I want to plot my own course throughout this world. Like, that's what made it seem so exciting to me. That's what really drew me into it, was hearing about that mode. Yeah. And like playing a different one where it's like, oh, there's only a few factions and you've got specific objectives. That sounds way more boring.
Yeah, exactly. I think it says a lot about some of my favorite strategy games, because I'm thinking about this compared to like XCOM.
Halo Wars. That's my point of comparison.
Because
I played the Settlers.
The Settlers?
Yeah. Oh. I would turn off all the enemy AI so I could just build loads of mines. My goal was that I wanted to entirely colonize the whole world map. I gave up very quickly. It becomes very boring.
Fair. Well, if you've not got an opposite end, because I'll jump off this tangent too, because when I was a kid, I used to play Age of Empires on easy, and I would be terrified at any kind of conflict I'd have to do, because I would just want to build my town and then my army, and when I had a maxed out army, I would then attack.
I think that's always been the thing for me, and this actually kind of is apparent across our Total War run as well, or at the very least the style in which we played this game, is that when I was young and I had a PC and I was trying strategy games, because I always liked the potential or the idea of them, but I never felt smart enough, for lack of a better word, to actually get into them. Because like, I would play the Settlers and I would turn on the AI, and then it would get to the point where I'd have to build armies and my brain just wouldn't work with it. Like, it was like, okay, I built all these troops, I'm going to march them to go fight my enemies, and then they all just died, and I don't know why, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Like, my brain would just never work with that. Yeah. And that very much carried across here, because you were basically I like to say that you were my military commander. Like I got you to handle all the fighting for me, basically.
Pretty much. You were the queen.
I was the head of government. You were the head of the military.
Exactly. Yeah. I was all of your advisors at once.
Yeah.
Because I was like both a battle and strategy advisor.
Yeah. It was like this was most analogous to the presidency of Ronald Reagan, where I was just a nice smiley guy who was like, let's take all this land and let's do all this stuff and build a charnel pit.
Yeah.
And you were like, my queen, we must do this and go here. And you were like the power behind the throne.
Yeah.
It was basically honestly just like how actual governments work. Where like I was like the elected official who was like, all right, we're going to do all these things. And you were like, all right, this is what we actually need to do. This is what we actually have to do to win these wars. And I was like, that's just, yeah, man.
Yeah. That's a very good way of putting it. But yeah, do we want to jump into just the rough basics of how this plays? Because I imagine...
Oh yeah, take me for a ride, Connor, because you're going to be the real lead on this one.
Fair. So...
I just clicked on buttons and things happened.
Yeah. So... Total War is a real-time strategy game. I think some people debate that it isn't, but
it's turn-based, isn't it? It's not real-time.
No, it's real-time.
But there was no real-time there. They weren't moving around when I wasn't moving around.
That's because you were doing the strategy layer.
Yeah.
That's because the playthrough that we did, Ash did almost entirely the entire thing on the strategy layer.
Oh yeah, so all right, I'm just going to put this out here at the onset. Don't listen to anything I say. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm going to be like, didn't we we built like all kinds of things, right? There was no fighting going on. We were just winning wars. It was great.
Yeah.
To me, this was a turn-based strategy game. There was no real time about this.
Well, I think the few times that we had to do a actual battle in game, that was when I took control.
And that was we did very few of those during the second run. Like we did one, and it was just because we hadn't done one.
Yeah.
We were like, we might as well just do one just to see it.
I thought that given that Ash isn't that experienced with strategy games, I figured that we'd play it on the easy mode. And I think, it was actually a little bit too easy because I was...
But you know what, though? I entirely didn't mind. Like, I'm so not into this genre that I was just like, I just love winning. I just love taking over places.
Yeah. So the battle layer for the Total War games generally involves you having a bird's eye view across the battlefield with your army of just hundreds, if not thousands. Someone is dying.
Oh no.
Out there.
They've died in the battle.
They're dying to know how the battle layer is.
17 bats came at them from the forest and swooped around them for a bit, and now they're like, we have to retreat, our morale is shattered.
Well, I hope they're not playing on auto-resolve or they'll all be dead. But you take this bird's eye view of the battlefield with your great legions of forces beneath you. If you ever lived in the UK and you ever watched a show called Time Commander, and you've ever seen them watch over these big battlefields of virtual men running around, that is Total War.
Oh, dude, I know. It was so exciting when I found out that Time Commander was just using a video game. Like, when I watched it when I was a young girl, because what Time Commander was that it was not really a game show, but it was like that kind of thing, where they'd have random members of the British public come on to the show, and they would be... The premise would be that you would refight historic battles and see if you could either make the winning side lose or if you could win with the right people and things like that.
Yeah.
So, for instance, there was like an episode where it was you're doing the battle between Boudica and the Romans, and it's like the challenge is can you get Boudica to win that fight?
Yeah, it was kind of neat.
Yeah.
I remember being enamored by it. It wasn't quite Bamzuki.
No, nothing can be Bamzuki. No.
But Your general strategy is quite a lot of very basic fundamentals of military command. It's moving your units in, forming formations out of them, and just positioning. You want to protect your flanks from cavalry and anything that moves particularly fast, and you want to ensure that you're able to counter a lot of the units that are going to be difficult for you to beat with the wrong unit. So, for instance, cavalry are bad against spears.
Yeah, so to set this up here for me, because... this is one of those unique parts of a game. I'm not sure if we're ever going to have this again or in any future game, where even though we played many, many hours of Total War in various versions of it, I have come no closer to understanding how the battle mechanics work than I did when we first started playing.
Yeah.
Because you were the one who was always doing it.
Yeah.
So to kind of zoom in a little bit, would you say that the individual unit matchups are kind of like a rock, paper, scissors thing? Is it like some like infantry is bad against cavalry and so on and so forth?
I think rock, paper, scissors is actually oversimplifying it a little bit too much for Total War.
We're doing too much Halo Wars there.
A bit too much Halo Wars, because...
my only point of reference.
Because generally speaking, even if you're aware that your army of archers is going to beat an entire army of infantry, if you're not keeping your distance, if you're not putting them on higher up hills and things like that, because terrain's important as well.
Yeah. If you stand in forest, you get +10 to cover.
We're close, honestly, yeah. Ranged units have a difficult time in forests. That's one such thing. But
I really want to impress upon people how much that I am a sweet, humble girl who knows little of the ways of war. And me watching Connor play the battle segments in Total War was like watching a madman do his dark work. Like, it reminds me of the scenes in Death Note when Light is riding in the Death Note, or like when you watch a composer who's really into it, where you're just like sweeping the mouse in like directions and in movements that I've never seen anyone move a mouse before. And you're like, all right, I've got to get these guys over here and then do this and do this and do this, and I'm like, I have no idea what's happening. I can't even begin to understand or to break down what you're doing. It was so confusing to me.
Oh my god, I would even argue that it's not even as frantic as some of the more conventional RTS games out there. I see people trying to play like Age of Empires, Command & Conquer and that kind of thing, and they're running around all the goddamn time, screens flicking around all the time. That's something I really struggle with when recording the Dawn of War videos, is that I'm like, okay, I want to make sure I'm winning the battles that I'm fighting right now.
Yeah, no one can know that you're bad at Dawn of War.
That's the one RTS I'm going to say I actually am good at. Thank you. You can't take this from me. It's more just holding the shots, like making it easier for people to follow, whereas generally when you're playing an RTS, you're jumping around everywhere to be like, back to base, back to the builders, back to resources, back to army, and all of this stuff.
Yeah, for reference, every time I am tasked with playing a game on a keyboard and mouse, I think it's got this similar vibe to like getting your grandma to hold a game controller where I'm sitting there like, ooh, this is exciting. What do these buttons do, Connor?
Oh god, I feel that way about like VR these days.
Yeah.
But generally, there's two elements to combat I think are very crucial to Total War combat that I think makes it quite distinct from the other RTSs, which is leadership and fatigue. Units can get tired. You know, they have to run around big open fields. They have to chase.
They're having a really difficult time. They have to march so often, and they never get any breaks. And we don't even pay them. Like, we expect so much of them.
Well, you don't, because you've got a horde of zombies, and you've got the free upkeep on them.
Yeah, you know, I pay you to deal with that.
You busted their little undead unions, but the other factions there is upkeep and stuff. But it's very much what I quite enjoy is being a very realistic part of nation building and kind of war, which is that maintaining a standing army is really fucking expensive and will drain all your resources because you have to pay these soldiers and like pay for their upkeep and their food and their maintenance, and it becomes completely impossible to maintain. Like, I remember in this, even though we didn't have to pay that much in terms of upkeep, we still had to consider very carefully, do we have the resources to furnish another army right now? Yeah, that's a big element of the strategy layer that ties all these smaller battles together.
They really interlock in a way that I find really engaging.
But generally, when it comes to fatigue, your units will get more tired, and that will mean that they become less effective over time. They might become slower, or they might end up hitting not as hard as they should do. The second element of the combat is leadership, which can be affected by fatigue, having low fatigue, and trying to bundle them into fights which they can't really last in. Is that if they are getting demolished, or they are, in the case of Total War, being, scared by great horrifying magics or anything, their morale will start to break, and they will begin to run away. You lose control of them. Sometimes they'll rally, they'll come back, and you can control them again, but sometimes they might just shatter entirely and they're gone. So,
I imagine you can have like equipment and like leadership tactics that can kind of mitigate panic as well, I imagine.
Yeah, you can. That's something that's very important to the leader powers, as well as just keeping your units close to leaders. In older Total Wars, it was all about unit cohesion and where they're laid out. You want your leaders in the middle. You want their banner bearers flying. You want to keep them all unified and organized.
It's more complicated than just building an army of a lot of really powerful guys and then just sending them to go fight all your enemies. You have to really think about composition.
Yeah. There are some armies that do well in that, especially in Total War. Like, the Orcs can do pretty good in just being a big bundle. But for the most part, leadership's super important.
You ever seen 50 mushrooms in the same room?
That's fucked.
It's terrifying.
There's this great picture of and this is going to be very on brand for me, Ash. There's this great picture of a cat that's in a room, like a bedroom, where the floor is just covered in mushrooms. The entire floor just littered with various mushrooms. Scariest photo I've ever seen.
I'd like to see that. That sounds rather exciting.
I'll pull that up during the break.
Yeah.
But
So what was the downside of the vampire faction? What do they get in exchange for not having upkeep costs?
So vampires, instead of having fatigue, have something that is called binding. It's effectively the spells that you have cast over the various
arcane energy that binds their souls and their bodies together, I suppose. Yeah.
So effectively what it means is the vampire counts Their armies effectively work like the droid army in Phantom Menace, which is that if you are able to take down their leaders, the binding across the entire army will weaken. And
so if they killed Theobald Regak, the greatest soldier of our time,
yeah,
that would have affected the morale of my troops.
It would have done, because with the vampire counts, the binding is actually a replacement for their leadership and fatigue.
Okay.
So when their binding ends up breaking and weakening, instead of running away, they will just start to crumble. They'll lose health and lose units and they'll die. So most of the time with Total War battles, when you lose a battle, you'll usually keep a good chunk of your army because they'll run away.
Yeah.
But with the vampire counts, it's entirely risk and reward.
Right.
Because if your vampire dies and your units get wiped out, your army is gone.
So I guess in our permutation of the games that we played, both of them, we were just playing on easy, so there wasn't much chance of our leaders being killed and having that come to bear on us.
Yeah, that was a thing that modified the stakes a lot in our favor.
Yeah.
Because this is the thing.
No, we played on hard. Don't listen to leaders now.
Because this is the other side of Total War that's more prevalent in the single player side of it, which is the strategy layer. The idea of having this great big overworld that connects these smaller battles together to give them context. It's more about the conquest of the entire continent and not so much just facing against one general and stuff like that.
That was the stuff that I found infinitely more interesting. That kind of really got my my imagination going, and me looking out over this big map and saying, I will conquer these lands, and like thinking about all the threats around me and stuff.
I mean, exactly. I ended up just basically letting you be sort of like head of the strategy layer while I was your little advisor in the back.
See, I like to think of it that I'm the head of state and you're the head of government.
Okay.
Like, I was just a figurehead who was like, we will open many new hospitals. There is beautiful development. I'm going to name this place Kesson. And then you would actually make all the decisions for me because I had no idea what was going on.
Yeah, there was a lot of times where something would happen. I'd be like, oh, Ash, so with this thing right now, we should do this completely different thing you haven't thought about because that will win us total victory.
I think I was very much content for you just to tell me the right moves to make so my map could get bigger and bigger. Like, I was just obsessed with imperial possessions, being like, I won Strikeland or whatever it's called. Like, I won these realms over here and stuff.
There would be several times where I would see you zoom out of the map to one, switch to faction colours so you could see your big growing mass of red, and then secondly to switch it over to vampiric corruption to see how much your undead influence is actually starting to seep into the land itself.
And that stuff was so Moorish. Like, it actually made me a little concerned because it made you understand how empires begin.
Yeah.
Because you're looking at a map and you're like, I want all of this. I want all of this land. It belongs to me by right.
Well, that's something I think is super important as someone who ended up being into, like, quite interested in history being younger, was playing games like Total War and other sort of big map games and strategy games, was being like, oh, I've actually got context for why Conquest was so addicting and why empires wanted to expand. It wasn't just for the hell of it. It was because they took satisfaction in growing their dominion and their legacy and that kind of thing. Games have often been very good at gamatizing violence. You know, obviously lots of games are about shooting people, stabbing people, running around and that kind of thing.
Them.
Yeah. And as a result, war is the next logical step. It's conquering and commanding your armies and all of this sort of stuff. As for the strategy layer, as I've said briefly, this is turn-based rather than real-time, where every turn you
Hence why I was allowed to play it.
Which is where your armies are represented by just a little guy on the map, and you can recruit...
Really giant dude who runs around on the map. I like looking at the guys walking around. Like that brought me a lot of joy.
It's like a board game come to life, really. Where you can recruit the units in your army to like make them better and better. You have to build up the cities that you own, and when you conquer other territories, you end up building new buildings there. Basically trying to increase your economy to sustain your armies, as well as doing other smaller things like trade, diplomacy, and espionage, as it were.
Oh yeah, everyone loved us. We were the belle of the town. We were so beloved by all.
Yeah, we definitely didn't make many enemies.
Well, we were the strongest army in the world, Connor, so they're friends if you ask me, because I will crush them otherwise.
We did end up making some unlikely friends.
I believe, I remember the big issue in our first campaign that was played in Warhammer 2, the hot sequel to Warhammer, was that there's like a separate vampire faction in Warhammer 2 who's near Isabella von Carstein. I can't remember what his name is.
Mannfred von Carstein.
Mannfred von Carstein.
It's funny because in the actual canon, not in the canon, in the actual game's rules, he is considered the head of the vampire faction. He owned Castle Drakenhof, which was renamed by you to be GoldCastlePartyTown.
GoldCastlePartyTown, the beautiful beating heart of my empire.
Yeah, so he owned like the biggest vampire hub in the world.
I swear when we started, though, he wasn't as big as us.
No, because we were doing a heck of a lot better than him.
Oh, right, yeah.
This was the thing with the AI is... And also... everyone who likes Warhammer can tell you, Mannfred von Carstein's a fucking putz.
Yeah,
Everyone
Isabella's where it's at.
Isabella
She's
and
a doll.
Vlad. Yeah, they are the best. They're the better sides of the Carsteins.
They're the real power behind the throne.
Yeah, Vlad's a little bitch. He let the world get blown up.
Did he?
Yeah, he did in the end times.
Which end times are we referring to? Hasn't there been like 25 different end times?
No, there's just been the one.
Okay, maybe I'm being a little flippant then.
No.
But the point is that we ended up confederating with him, and then it turned out that he had like vastly overstretched his region of influence and then invaded like a bunch of territories to the north.
Yeah.
And made this really long, thin line going up that was impossible to defend.
He did. He went on this weird war path up into the frozen north. And
I'm like, we didn't know that. Like, we took the territory and then suddenly we were like, oh, what's going on up here? Oh, we have all this land. It sucks.
We had to let all of it go that we could reconsolidate because he bankrupted us. It was
a terrible deal for us. We did not get much out of that.
It sucked. Which thankfully Total War Warhammer 3 did the blessing of shoving Mannfred into the south side of the map. One, because they took a lot of care of attention to try and diversify the map a bit more, to have more varied enemies, to make things less bland.
Yeah.
And it also meant that he just wasn't in the fucking way.
Yeah, because we were to the south, wasn't that? It was dwarves and orcs, right?
Yeah.
To the west, it was the human empires.
Yeah.
And then to the east, it was mostly dwarves.
Yeah.
Then north is elves, where we were?
North had Kislev and Chaos. Kislev being another human faction, and Chaos being a human faction that's woken up on the wrong side of bed.
Oh, so did the elves in our campaign come from somewhere else? They had conquered from some other part of the map?
Yeah, they were kind of scattered around.
Okay. It was Drakic?
Dryker,
yeah.
Who I think when we played Warhammer 2, she hadn't been added to the game yet. But they did a big rework of the Wood Elves at some point where they added a few more factions here and there, and they put a little Wood Elf faction led by Dryker, who is this tree woman, in the middle of the map. She's a very weird case where most of the time the Wood Elves are entirely isolationist, but when push comes to shove, they will pivot to being more good aligned.
Okay.
Dryker just hates civilization. And as a result of that, we took advantage of that, kind of gave her a few non-aggression packs and let her go wild so that she could deal with the North for us when we played Warhammer 3. And that's interesting, the way that the dynamics work. Like, in a way, it sucks that the factions in this game will eventually pivot to the good guys and the bad guys, but there is nuance in a few places. The dwarves and humans can fall out quite quickly. The Wood Elves don't want anything to do with anyone. The vampires, Skaven, and Chaos, despite all having these entirely different motivations, do have some reason to unify against common enemies.
Yeah.
But when you actually start wiping out the Empire and the dwarves and the like, then they'll turn on each other.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the things that I found so infinitely engaging about both of my times with each of these games, is that it doesn't have its own story. I mean, I know it has like story missions that you can play.
Yeah.
But when you're doing this big world map mode, the game is so complex and the amount of factions so numerous that you kind of really create your own dynamic, really engaging story. Like for us, each of the individual factions began to take on their own significance. Like the Wood Elves, we were kind of neutral with. The humans to the west, we have this infinite rivalry with. The orcs, we just found funny.
Yeah.
Like there's so much flavor that you put into the world yourself based on the simulation that's being presented to you, because it creates so much variance that it feels like it's your own tale, you know, like you're crafting your own history.
Yeah, that's the fun part about these kinds of games. It's what I like about grand strategy games and strategy games in general.
Like, for instance, like we played the same faction in both Total War Warhammer 2 and Total War Warhammer 3, but the individual stories that were told over those two campaigns were wildly different from one another.
They were, yeah. I'm not sure if there's any more mechanics I should talk about before we go into that. Diplomacy is a relatively open and shut, simple affair.
Yeah.
In between your turns, you can talk to the other factions to barter with them or to declare war on them.
Yeah.
You can get trade agreements to help each other's economies. You can... in Total Warhammer 3, you could even swap cities if they've got one that you want and they've got one that they benefit from. You can strike an agreement. And you can also give gifts to butter them up if you're trying to confederate, which you sadly can only confederate members of your own faction. You couldn't say... It's a shame. I would have loved it if you could have manipulated the human factions and confederated them that way. That would have been super cool, but just with the way the game's coded and the way it's balanced, they didn't do it like that.
I wonder if that would become like the dominant strategy, just to try and confederate as much as you possibly could.
Yeah. I think it would have been more true to how the vampires are in that setting.
Yeah, like infiltrating like mortal society, right? And kind of like insidiously seeping their magics and evil into those places rather than just invading them with big armies.
Yeah, because that's the background of the von Carsteins, is they're part of... the human empire in Warhammer is a big allegory for the Holy Roman Empire. And the von Carsteins in Sylvania, where they're from, are part of the Empire. They're never recognized by anyone as being legit because they're ghouls. But
I mean, I guess they kind of get that element across with the mechanic of vampiric corruption, where it's like you're slowly bleeding and draining the life out of the land, and you can start doing that in regions that you don't even control. Yeah, it's like the mere presence of vampires in your world just takes the life from it and causes things to just die based on that.
Yeah, it's super cool. Yeah. There's several factions that have their own corruption mechanic, and we had to kind of try and beat down some of theirs to keep ours. When chaos became a big problem. I mean, jumping from Total War Warhammer 2 to 3, for instance, it was just chaos corruption, vampire corruption, poop. and Skaven corruption. But then in Total Warhammer 3, they split all the Chaos Gods into their own faction. So there were suddenly 5 different Chaos corruptions, and it was like, oh god.
Yeah, it was very complex.
Oh, Jesus. But it was fine. We completely wiped the floor with them in the end.
No, and we drained the life and vitality from all of the lands. We felled trees with our mere presence. We killed animals by the mere sight of us.
Oh god, we really were Saruman.
We were terrible. We were not good people. No. Our success was not good for the world.
It wasn't, but it was incredibly funny.
Yeah, and we looked damn good doing it.
That we did. Very stylish faction.
Yeah.
Do we want to talk about the flavour of the vampires? Just how they look and things?
Yeah, well, the next category on our notes, I believe, is visuals and sound, which is something that I have quite a lot to say about, because one of the most defining things to me about Warhammer is that it's kind of a part of a heritage of visual design that I'm not necessarily that interested in. I kind of like European guys with big armor and big pointy things, and everything's really dense and highly detailed. I'm not super into that, so like I kind of bounce off Warhammer quite a lot of the time. When you take it though, when you make it to this big world map, and like it's this massive region that you can see, I actually found the visuals in this game really kind of engaging. Like it's the most that I've ever cared about individual Warhammer factions, you know? Like it's the most I've looked at them and gone, oh, these guys seem kind of cool actually. Like something about the perspective kind of made it work for me.
This game, I think, is very important in several different ways of bringing more people to look at the setting and go, oh, this is actually kind of neat. Even people who might not ever want to bother reading the Warhammer books or collecting the tabletop or anything can still enjoy something about the world, even if it's more just to have it as a set of flavour.
Yeah.
And I'm glad, because Warhammer Fantasy is one of those settings that encapsulates a lot of ways that I like to world build, which is that it can wear several different aesthetics and still keep it up.
Yeah.
You know, if you want your medieval knights that are all feudalistic and King Arthur and Holy Grail and all this stuff, they exist in Bretonnia, but the main human faction is the Empire, which is more based on 1700s Europe, which is less touched upon in a lot of fantasy. And that's neat that they've done that.
Yeah, I guess in our campaign alone, we had it was like Regency era, like high culture vampires.
Yeah.
Like medieval Bretonic knights.
Yeah.
Dumb idiot stupid orcs who are the most modern, audacious, like people who just scream a lot.
Yeah.
We had like Russia, we had Asia, we had all kinds of different cultures and styles and tones that were being melded quite seamlessly together in a way that made them feel authentic and like they existed together in the same world rather than feeling discordant.
Yeah. It's a really great unifying way of bringing all these together. I have to commend them for managing to do that, and it's something that I look up to as a bar of...
Yeah, like you can imagine like in Lord of the Rings, it'd be like, here comes the Lord of the Rings factions. It's humans, it's dwarves, they all look vaguely the same. I just think Warhammer was better suited for this kind of multi-faction style, though. I think it works a lot better in that sense. Like, I think Lord of the Rings is more suited to a grand battle kind of game where you'll fight, you have these massive armies and you're making them fight rather than... I don't want to build settlements in Lord of the Rings. I want to fight big armies in Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, I can see an appeal to it, but I think it says a lot where you've got games like Battle for Middle-earth, which is another RTS, but it doesn't do the Total War style of gameplay. It goes for something else, and I think that it benefits from that method of play. Fucking love Battle for Middle-earth. I used to play it at LAN parties with my brother, but...
that's the sweetest thing you've ever said in your life.
Oh, listen, like it's the same with Warhammer. A lot of this.
No, there's no critique, man. That was adorable. Like that's such a perfect encapsulation of a certain time, right?
Yeah,
doing LAN parties, playing PC games with your brother. Like
I miss BattleNet.
Yeah.
Not Battle.net, which is the Blizzard.
Was
launcher
Battle.net
thing.
one of those game stores in the city?
Yeah, it was above Iceland. And
The store, not the country.
yeah, the store, not the country. There was a shop called Iceland where the mums go.
Yeah.
It was above that, and they would sell.
Oh yeah, I
tabletop
always wanted to
figures.
go in there. Like I never got the chance, but it seemed really cool in there.
It was great.
Yeah.
You had LAN parties. You could play pretty much every game that was on PC at the time. And
Not quite provided for by Games Belong, I imagine.
oh no, well I've used Games Belong once. Twice even, but that went out of business a while ago, and I can see why that happened.
And now it's a Greg's.
It's now a Greg's.
The fate of all things in this country.
That's the Greg's corruption spreading.
yeah.
I want to see that map of the UK
Yeah.
is where the Pret and Greg's sort of influences lie.
If you want a coda for this, Greg's is the kind of folksy, humble, like northern store, and Pretz is the very fancy upmarket store that's rubbish and we all hate it.
Yeah, the goddamn Southerners. We can't talk, we're from Norfolk. Norfolk is basically south.
No, we live in our own little pocket dimension. We're in the East, Connor.
The East Anglia.
I know this country might not be the size of Idaho, but we have an East, okay?
Listen, we're the size of, I think, Alabama.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a win for us.
But the vampires being the faction that you decided to choose for the playthrough, I think, was super special when it came to playing this type of game because it really lent into the fantasy side of Total War Warhammer.
Oh yeah, I think it was definitely one of the great. God, I've completely forgotten the word.
Like a persuader.
Yeah, no, like the lubricant that made my entry into this franchise sweeter or easier or smoother. It's because like vampires are cool. I love vampires. I love gothic Regency shit. Like I'm wearing bat tights right now and I wear a lot of black dresses. Like that kind of aesthetic was what I found the most appealing from all the factions that we looked at.
Yeah, well, there's something for everyone. I think you've got lizard.
Yeah.
You've got rats.
I'm sure you love the rats.
I think the funny.
You ever run a rat campaign?
Oh yes, I have played Skaven before. It's fun. They can build. The rats are very funny. They are very.
End of sentence. That's all we need to say. The rats are very funny.
They have giant hamster wheels.
What?
But they have.
But they're rats.
They have a vehicle that's a giant hamster wheel, and it has a gun attached to it.
That's absolutely fantastic. That's wonderful. That's why this game rocks so hard.
I fucking love it.
Yeah.
I think
I can just imagine you sitting in your chair in the dark and you're like sending your army of hamster wheels against some army. And you're like, go, my pitties, crush them.
You do feel like that when you're
Yeah.
playing Skaven, because Skaven units have really low leadership, but they're just hordes. They're horrible little cretins, and their whole strategy is, if we have to kill our own guys to win, we'll do it.
It's basically the Pigman faction.
Yeah, they are kind of like the more fucked up.
You just send 100 little rats and you're like, go on, nah.
Yeah. Someone else on YouTube made a very good comparison to the Skaven, actually, where they said the Skaven is a surprisingly good allegory for the Roman Empire, which is that it's just a big horde faction that tries to encompass everything, but the way that it's run is pretty much like the Roman Senate. It's just full of backstabbing, like, little
Is
fuckers.
there a rat senate?
There is the Council of 13, which is basically the Rat
What,
Senate.
from Kingdom Hearts? Who's on the Council of 13? Like,
Well, there's Queekhead Taker.
it's Roxas, you know.
And there's, oh my god,
Raticus, everyone remembers.
Radican.
Yeah.
Radican from the Great Mouse Detective.
Yeah, he's on there. Yeah.
Sorry, it's just the idea of the Skaven being in those big coats and chairs, and they're just going like, "Get Keyblade now!" Yes.
I don't think Sora could deal with that.
I think
A bunch of rats came after him. I think he'd be freaked the fuck out.
but yeah,
Warhammer.
fantasy.
Listen,
battle.
what I'm saying is that I'm not a Warhammer fan now, but I have enjoyed Warhammer.
Yes, which is
I have seen some Warhammer and gone, that was fun.
that's more than I can say for many friends.
Yeah.
Well, I did want to say one thing,
Yeah?
which was that I wanted to make two observations about the world of Warhammer. One, which is that it does the very admirable thing of not having the sort of human faction just be the British. The Bretonnians.
Huge loss for us.
Well, the Bretonnians are more French. The Empire is supposed to be more German, and all this kind of thing. If anything, the closest allegory to the British is in two places. One is the High Elves, who are a hoity-toity, up their own arse empire that's on an isolated island in the middle of the sea, and they believe that they know what's best for everyone, and they also might bring about the end of the world by accident, whoopsie. And two is this small island that's just called Albion, that's apparently full of a bunch of just savage, primitive, who cares it's
Yeah.
who were just playing football all day.
Well, Creative Assembly are British, right? From
Yeah.
memory. No one hates the British more than the British themselves.
Exactly.
Our level of self-loathing goes beyond. I don't think anyone can quite match how much we despise ourselves.
Oh, sorry, tell a lie. Third British faction, the Orcs.
Really?
Yeah, well, they all speak like football.
Like
hooligans.
chavs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And it might be a slightly damning indictment of how we view wealth inequality in this country, but
maybe a bit so, yeah. We have the clear... Well, you know what? I'll say that the High Elves are the South and...
there you go. They've got lots of prets. You can build many prets to keep your economy upticking, you know?
Oh my god.
Do you want to talk about the bodacious sound?
This was one of those games I used to play while having podcasts on or listening to other things. So I think when we played our Total War 2 playthrough, I think I had actually turned the music down to 0, so you didn't get to hear any of the music.
Yeah, because I was gonna say it's not like the sound to me was particularly memorable.
No, it's the thing is that listening to the soundtrack itself more directly, I do think that it's actually quite a decent soundtrack.
I'm sure. Yeah.
I don't think it's remarkable, but I think that the atmosphere that's over the battle maps is great, and I also think that the battle music also does a good job as well.
Do you remember when we used to rank the soundtracks?
Oh, yeah. Well, we have our 3 rankings at the end of every episode. We used to have 5, and one of them was soundtrack, and the other one was likable protagonist, but I think that...
Why are we doing that? What was that one about?
I think it was because we talked about doing protagonist, and then you were like, okay, but that technically means that there are some protagonists that are very good as protagonists, but we didn't actually like them.
Right.
So we didn't feel right doing it.
Okay.
It was sort of splitting hairs a bit, but...
Well, that's what this whole thing is, right?
It is.
Sorry, I just realised the third category on our notes is Ash doesn't like Warhammer.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's true.
Yeah, you got me there. Guilty as charged.
Whereas I love Warhammer.
You're a huge Warhammer fan. Your passion for Warhammer is uncomplicated and unqualified. Mm-hmm. You feel nothing but undying love and dedication to the Warhammer fiction and Games Workshop, the best corporation in
yes,
the world.
I adore Games Workshop.
Yeah.
Yes, this video is sponsored by Games Workshop.
Remember how if the Emperor had a text-to-speech device just ended because everyone wanted to stop doing it?
Oh yeah, that was definitely the reason why.
We are nodding right now. Yeah.
Oh god. I guess one thing I do want to say in terms of sound is I want to comment on the voice acting, because
it's really good.
It's very good, and one thing I love that every unit does, it's a completely practical choice, it makes a ton of sense for them to do it, but every unit at one point will scream their name like a Pokemon. Like you So we did one battle before recording this, because I was looking over our vampire army, and I was just like, oh, I forgot I hired some crossbowmen, and I clicked to them, and they immediately just went, crossbowmen! And it was just like,
See, the main thing I remember about the sound is that in our Warhammer 3 campaign, we basically auto-resolved every single fight bar 1.
Yeah.
And whenever you click the auto-resolve button, it just does this weird little, like guys yelling sound that I found really amusing.
I think like the commanders would mutter things as well when you're like commanding.
Isabella would just yell stuff, scream a bunch of random expletives.
Yeah. It's very funny when you try to move them somewhere and they run out of movement speed, because they just start going, not possible! No! I refuse! You
move Theobald Regak into going into battle, and he goes, I'm going to suck your dick!
Blah blah. Theobald Regak was not someone I expected to be one of our top generals.
Yeah, he was top 5 along with Melissa Retep.
Yeah, Melissa Retep.
Yeah.
Melissa Retep is we'll have to get to her.
Coming for you, Melissa Retep.
We'll But I think for the most part, the presentation of this game, even if my computer wasn't like top of the line to run everything fully.
We couldn't have all the end of the line graphics features. It really affected my enjoyment of the game. We didn't have ray tracing, so it didn't really get me that good.
We had to switch portraits from 3D to 2D.
I just liked that.
Well, yeah, the art does look good when it's 2D. The when you don't have a particularly powerful computer, I think having the 3D models in the corner is a bit of a blah.
That's why I'm so mad about Persona.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Is it because
they got rid of the illustrations for the demons?
Oh,
and they're just the 3D models now, and it looks terrible.
Yeah.
Look forward to our Persona 4 episode. That's going to be 7 hours long.
We
have to talk about Nanako.
We'll have Sen on board.
Yeah, we will. Our artist will have to be on that episode. Yeah,
that'll be great though.
One of our many guest episodes.
Yes,
by many I mean 2.
At this time.
At this time, who knows? There's an endless. We don't know that many people.
When we bring Reggie Fils-Aimé on to review Pikmin 4, I don't know.
He's not busy these days. He's not up to anything good.
No.
He can be on our Z tier podcast.
But yeah, I think that the presentation of this game is like relatively top notch.
Yeah, no, I think in terms of how much it's trying to accomplish, the complexity of what it's trying to achieve is really impressive, and I think it comes together really well. Like it's just really cohesive and engaging, and I just love scrolling over my maps and looking at all the menus, and it made picking out the best economic strategy for my regions look fun.
Yeah, I'm going to be completely frank with the listeners on the podcast right now, which is that being a strategy game, this is a game that can be very convoluted and complex.
I had no idea what was going on half the time.
Yeah, there's lots of intricacies to battle strategies and every single race that's in the game. And I've got to be honest with you, I think that for the sake of this podcast, I want to focus less on that and more focus upon our experience of playing it. Because, as we mentioned before, the narrative experience of just having this emerging story from your conquests, I think is one of the big engrossing parts of this. And if I want to go more into depth on Total War, I want to do videos on this.
But they won't have me in them. I won't be here saying, I don't know what's going on. What the hell's a Warhammer? I just know about Melissa Ratep.
Yeah, join us for our special episode in a year's time where it's just me explaining the entire Warhammer storyline to Ash. But yes, I think that as a result of that, it might be worth us moving on to what we can, for the most part, recall of our 2 playthroughs of the game that we had and just talk about the storyline that we had.
Yeah, because we're trying to craft a narrative here, which is something that we've not got much experience in, I suppose, on the podcast. So bear with us here, because this might be a bit janky.
So, the Grand Chronicle of the list goes on, and their conquest of the old world. There was several continents we could have started on. We obviously went with the von Carsteins, but we decided to go with what at this point would have been the sort of northeast side of the world map since we started on Total War Warhammer 2.
We utilise the tried and tested method that I've been using my entire life when it comes to choosing factions in any kind of game or any kind of setting. I found the cutest girl, and I was like, they look cool. I'm into that.
I don't know what it says about Warhammer that the cutest girl ended up being Isabella von Carstein.
They were not good girl options, if I'm being honest. Yeah. But
well, to be fair, I feel like the other running candidates would have been 2 of the Bretonnian characters, which were maybe a little bit too sword and chivalry for your liking, and then some elves.
I think I was umming and ahhing between the vampire faction and the elves because I wasn't so sure I wanted to be that evil. But then once I started being that evil, it's kind of hard to go back.
Yeah, and plus, to be fair, I'm glad that you went with vampires because, to be frank, a lot of the elven starts end up, especially back in Warhammer 2, it would just start you with fighting other elves.
They seem like a bunch of fucking dinguses as well. They're like such Melvins. Like, I wanted to shove all of them into a locker. Like, they just really weren't cool to me at all.
Oh my god. You're not wrong, to be honest. I can think of a few people that won't be happy to hear that, but actually... No, you know what, when I say that, that's actually a very small niche of people. A lot of people think the elves are putzes and are to blame for everything.
I'm just going to put this like this, Connor. I don't think I've won the favour of the Warhammer community with my comments today.
So as I alluded to, we started out our first campaign playing Total War Warhammer 2. So we've got 2 kind of story times to go. 2 different
Two very
timelines.
Similar stories.
Yeah,
I've seen vampires fighting some guys.
That they were, but I'd say that the ends were different. Where we started out in Total War Warhammer 2 back in 2020. Around about this point, I believe the newest update that would have just dropped would have been either the Twisted and the Twilight or the Paunch and the Warden, or the Warden and the Paunch, whatever it's called.
Wake up, the Paunch and the Warden just dropped.
So at this point, the old world was relatively bland for the most part. It was crowded, too many vampires, and by that I mean Mannfred was there and he sucked ass. So, playing as Isabella von Carstein, we actually started in the small town of Schwarzhafen, which was...
That doesn't sound familiar to me.
No, it doesn't, because it was quickly renamed to Schwingen-Borfdorf.
Schwingen-Borfdorf, yeah, my beautiful capital.
Yeah. This was a very weird thing. Most of the factions in the game will have like a big-ass city be their capital. Ours was a town. Even when we took the bigger places later, that small place stayed our capital.
Never gone beyond the shady township.
Didn't.
So I want to impress upon our viewers now at this point that all of the names of all of these towns are stupid, and they're all like psychological profiles of how my brain was just completely battered by like 8 o'clock. Call it Schwingen-Borfdorf.
Well, I will say it was fascinating that you decided to name the settlements but not the characters. We kept them very much distinct.
I'm not going to rename Melissa Ratep.
Exactly, yeah.
Can't beat that.
Well, anyone that's familiar with the Vampire Counts campaign will probably be aware of Melissa Ratep.
Who
isn't even an important character.
She's a sweetheart.
Yeah, she's just
I liked the cut of her jib.
Isabella starts with herself, a small army, and then 2 vampire heroes. Because as far as the unit rosters in this game is concerned, which I probably should have talked about back in the Warhammer Fantasy Battle back on the tabletop, your armies would be composed of 5 different types of units, and I could be getting this wrong, but I'm going to try and do this by memory. It was Lords, Heroes, Common, Rare, and Very Rare, I believe it was. Like, you'd only have certain numbers of each. I think you could only have 1 Very Rare, and that would be shit like Dragons and that kind of thing. Warhammer 40k's got a similar kind of army composition, but it doesn't have quite... It's more like elite, heavy support and all this stuff. And as a result of that, Creative Assembly had to adapt these concepts into Total War. So they found a way to implement heroes, but in a really weird way. So since Total War 2 Shogun, there were these ninja units you could have running around the overworld that would do like espionage and assassinations for you. For some reason, the heroes in this game are that.
Yeah.
So when you recruit wizards and knights and all of these things, they have the same job as ninjas, which is to run around and assassinate things, sabotage infrastructure, spread plagues, all this kind of stuff, which is very weird in concept.
Yeah.
I don't know why they went with that, but they were just like, this boot fits and it works. And mechanically, it weirdly enough does work as well. But we had these 2 vampire heroes, one of which was called Melissa Ratep, who we kept an independent sweetheart for the entire game.
And we would always say her name as Melissa Ratep.
Melissa Ratep. And then a second one, which I've completely forgotten. I think we embedded her into an army and just let her fight battles.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. Because heroes and lords, they're like one-man armies. They crush things entirely by themselves.
They're gigantic.
On the overworld. And then they have to shrink down into little peon-sized people. And so we were looking around, and you opened up the diplomacy menu, and you went, "Oh, Connor, loads of people don't like us. Is it because we're horrible vampires?" And I said, "Yes." And you went, "Well, what about those guys? Those guys like us." And I said, "Yeah, those are other vampires, and they're putzers.
Yeah.
We should take them down a peg now. Fuck diplomacy. We should kick their ass, take their land. It's rightfully ours. Fuck them."
Was this Mannfred?
This was Tempelhof. That was like a third little faction that was there. So we wiped them off the map quite easily.
Okay. Was that our first conquest?
Yeah, our first proper conquest was Tempelhof. I think the actual castle itself was a bit tricky. We had to wait a while to build our forces up. But we eventually took them down and founded the prestigious kingdom of Sheringham.
Sheringham, for anyone who was curious, is a small coastal town in Norfolk.
I think we just called it that because one of our friends was living there at the time.
It has a wonderful swimming pool and a skate park.
I'm not sure if the swimming pool's still there anymore.
Fuck. What?
I think Splash got shut down.
This is terrible news.
I know, right? It had a cool slide.
That was like the only thing of worth in Sheringham.
Had some nice sweet shops.
Oh, fuck.
It was near Blakeney, where Seals were. It was that's what it had going for it.
Do we have a chroma, like a Great Yarmouth or anything?
I think we did have a Great Yarmouth.
Fantastic.
I don't remember what we called Great Yarmouth.
If you want to know what's in Great Yarmouth, it's rubble.
Yes.
Piles of rubble. It's not a particularly nice place to live.
For more Great Yarmouth representation on the internet, please look forward to the next episode of Hunter the Parenting, where we go into that.
They're going to Yarmouth?
Yeah.
Oh.
That's a leak that I've given. This goes on. Viewers are eating well. They found out what my next video is going to be, and they've also found out where the Hunter the Parenting's going.
Yeah, I look forward to Great Yarmouth.
So we began to build our first proper empire, building up our armies and taking dominion over our vampiric lands. We tried confederating with Mannfred a couple times, but he wouldn't have it.
He was resistant to our advances. He kind of wasn't into our wily, seductive charms, no matter how much gold we gave, or dark energy we gave him.
Yeah. The vampire equivalent of gold is just called dark magic, I think.
Just bad vibes.
Yeah. Which I guess is that's what we pay our troops in.
Because we could send that to factions that weren't vampiric in nature. So, like, we were trying to form an alliance with some orcs at some point. And we would just send them dark, evil energy, and they'd go, "Do you want gold?"
That's what's really funny about it. Because
what's the exchange rate? Like, what is one dark energy worth in gold?
Even the fucking rats use gold. I don't know why we trade in dark magic, but fine, whatever. Yeah. I actually don't remember if the Tomb Kings, which is the other undead faction, if they also have dark magic or if they have gold. Because they wear gold. They're
buried with all their treasure, I presume.
Yeah, so. They're the Egypt analog in that setting. They have similar mechanics to the vampire counts. But at this point, we looked west to a small little province called the Moot. and developed a quick obsession over the Moot.
Yeah, I can't remember why we were so obsessed with the Moot, other than the fact that it's called the Moot.
I think it was just because it was called the Moot.
Yeah, and it insulted me. It insulted my sensibilities and my honor that such a place would exist on my periphery. I was like, I must take it and rename it.
Yeah, the Moot is the Warhammer Fantasy equivalent of the Shire. So very early on into our campaign, we ended up committing a very much scouring of the Shire, as it were. By going into this place and corrupting it into our ways, turning it from a lovely little village under the administration of Stirland and into this absolute hellscape of a shady
I remember
town.
so this is the thing that was really exciting about this game, is that you understood how difficult it is to gentrify and modify or like modernize a state.
Yeah.
Because you have your capital and all your places where all your money's coming from, and then you take over these provinces, and it's like, I've got to invest money into the Moot. And I don't want to, and like the Moot is so underdeveloped, and there's nothing there.
Yeah.
And it kept telling us like, do you want to upgrade the Moot? And I was like, fuck the Moot. I'm not investing in the Moot. It's like, it's a stupid region. And it raises the question, why do you even want the Moot if you're not going to do anything with it? And it's like, I just want it
because it makes my map bigger.
Yeah, exactly. It's really fun at actually making you understand those decisions of like, are you going to invest in these territories? No.
Well, you made an observation, because this was one of those points where the context of the vampire counts became a little unusual with the game's mechanics, because the main way that you grow your settlements to become bigger is using something that is quite literally called growth. You need to have a surplus of population in order to upgrade your townships to get more building slots, which lets you build more buildings.
More pits.
Yeah, more pits. Yeah, the vampire buildings are all charnel pits and gibbets.
Yeah,
they're all
unholy bale fires and things like that.
Yeah, crypts and tombs and everything.
Like the local governor of the Moot has approved the construction of several piles of corpses, and that's going to really boost the local economy, you know?
Yeah. And that's what makes the idea that it's a population surplus so funny, because every time it would come up with us having one, you would always say, surely that's a detriment for us.
Yeah, well, this is a huge failing on our part.
Yeah, surely we want more corpses, not more people, but maybe we turn them into corpses. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, that was the thing that I always found really interesting about it, is that the implication was that we were governing lands that still had living populations in them, and they were just there like, this sucks. We can't do anything about it, but...
Yeah. I think also the mental image to me is very funny, that they're building tombs.
Yeah.
No one's died yet, but they're just like, all right, we'll make the tomb for when you die later.
This helps somehow.
And then you will become a grave guard or a necro dragon or something.
Like, it's an abstraction, but it is very amusing.
Yeah, it really is. That being said, taking the Moot ended up putting us at odds with the Kingdom of Stirland, one of the Grand Elector Counts of the Empire.
And our greatest rivals.
Our greatest rival, Stirland, which probably pissed off Mannfred, because Mannfred's whole backstory is that he was the rightful heir to Stirland, and then he became a vampire. So he believes Stirland should be his, but everyone's like, no, you're dead, you don't count anymore.
Yeah.
But the fact that we rocked up and decided to take Stirland probably pissed him off, and we'll get to Mannfred and his little piss boy ass later. Little crying piss baby Mannfred. As we marched into Stirland, which I think legitimately might have been some of the biggest resistance that we had.
Yeah.
They were still kind of putzes. We still did pretty damn good against them, because once we had the resources, we could steamroll them.
Yeah.
Especially given one of the Vampire Counts' biggest mechanics on the strategic layer, which is that most armies have to recruit units that take a turn in order to get more units into their army. Like they have to wait to build up their forces. You can do this as vampire counts, but you can also raise the dead from local battles.
Yeah.
I think if a place hasn't had a battle, you just raise basic like
skeletons and zombies
and
who aren't
bats.
very effective.
Yeah. But if there's been the site of a recent battle, you can get better undead that kind of let you steamroll. You know, the better you do in fights, the better stuff that you can get over time.
Exactly.
Some people would probably argue the vampire counts are kind of busted because of this, and I do think they kind of are.
But I was loving it.
Yeah, it was
I have no regard or no interest in the balance of this game. I was just like, yay, go my troops, win the wars.
Yeah, we just kept getting bigger and bigger armies and marching on Stirland, which, they put up a good fight. But eventually...
They were a worthy foe.
Yeah, and we ended up fighting them consistently over the small town of I think it was the small village that became renamed Fucked Around and Found Out. Because that's exactly what Stirland did. They fucked around and they found out. And we fought in this place like 5 times over the course of the campaign.
That's the main thing I remember about campaign 1 is that we kept gaining territory and then losing it.
Yeah.
And we had to keep reclaiming it, and it was this weird like back and forth over territory that I didn't want or need, but I just felt compelled to take.
Maybe that's why we got obsessed with the moot.
Yeah. Because I think they did keep taking back the moot, and I was like, you motherfuckers get out of the moot. There's no strategic value to the moot, but it's mine.
We had to keep building more corpse piles in the moot.
It had great symbolic value to me.
How many times do we have to teach you this lesson, young man?
It was my object, my desire, my ambition to break the human spirit, and my weapon of choice will be the moot. That is the stone upon which I will break their backs.
And so much so that Stirland, after wiping out several of their armies, ended up turning to the main head honcho of the Empire.
This was the most devastating thing that's happened to me in the last 2 years.
Yeah, we were finally ready to take over the entirety of Stirland, end the war for good, and be able to claim what is rightfully ours, or Mannfred's, but we're taking it because we don't trust him. We get to the final settlement in Stirland, and the Empire had confederated them.
Right at the very last second, at the very top of my conquest, when I was about to take the entire region for myself, they stole it away from me. At the apotheosis of my glory, Connor, they took everything from me.
They did.
Sorry, it's still raw.
And we weren't at war with the Empire, so we couldn't, like, march in and go and fight them again.
It would have affected our reliability.
It would have done.
As vampires.
Yeah, there's this...
If you can't trust vampires, who can you trust? I mean...
Yeah, there's this reliability mechanic with the diplomacy screen, which is that although you can make treaties and like non-aggression pacts with people, if you end up breaking those sorts of agreements, you end up losing your reliability, which means it's less likely people will sign into those with you in the future.
Yeah.
It gradually builds up again over time, but it takes a while. When you break a long-running pact, you are fucked for a long time.
And every time you pass through a remote village, everyone will whisper, the Oathbreaker. They walk through these halls.
Well, I will mention 2 things on that. One, the dwarves are, something we were worried about for a while. And by we, I mean me.
Yeah, I remember I was like, what are the dwarves going to do? They just stay in their mines, digging deeper into the earth. What trouble could they pose to my beautiful army of death?
Yeah.
And you were like, it's very cold over there.
Listen, those fuckers are all armored.
Yeah.
They're if we're going to keep fighting with auto-resolve, they're going to be a pain in the ass to beat.
Yeah, because they were our entire southern and eastern flank at a certain point, right? We were buffeted by the mountains.
Yeah, we were completely surrounded by dwarves on that side. So I spent most of the campaign going, all right, Ash, we need to wipe out like half the Empire, build up our forces, and prepare for the coming storm that is the dwarves.
And I was like, don't worry about it. It's going to be fine. What are the dwarves going to do?
Yeah, when they get sick of us, we're fucked.
Yeah.
The second thing is just briefly going back to that confederation mechanic. The reason why Stirland confederated with the Empire is because they were on death's door. They were so close to perishing that the kind of flavour of it is that the people wanted protection from the Empire, so they joined them in unison.
And they were willing to compromise on like tax laws and authority and things like that.
Yeah. This is something to remember for later when we make a mistake in the future with our piss boy Mannfred. I'm going to keep calling him that.
Yeah, piss boy Mannfred.
So,
waif of a man that he is.
Yeah. As this goes on, speaking of the dwarves, the southern flank of the dwarves did start having a few problems.
Yeah, I have a very fuzzy memory of you fighting 1,000,000 dwarves and it wasn't going very well and you were just sitting there getting really stressed and it was just me like, don't worry buddy, you got this.
Well, before the dwarves ended up sweeping in, we suddenly got attacked by rats.
No, this is the funniest thing that's ever happened in my life. Because we had sent a cadre of our troops, headed, I believe, by Vlad von Bargenblugen?
Vlad von Carstein.
Vlad von Carstein, yeah. And he was like, it suddenly cut to this cutscene, and obviously me being a complete neophyte with this kind of thing, I had no idea what was going on. I was like, a cutscene? This is weird. And it was Vlad walking through this valley with his troops, and it's something about it just looked really funny, because like you suddenly see these character models really close up, and they're going through this valley, and you were like, this is probably bad. And I was like, what do you mean? And then suddenly like 1,000,000 rats just came out of the trees and started marching towards Vlad, and Connor was like, oh, we're fucked.
Yeah, we got ambushed by Skaven, unfortunately.
Yeah.
That's one of the few times you get a little cinematic in the middle of your battles, and dear God, that surprisingly, despite all units involved being kind of trash, low-tier units, ended up being one of the closest battles, because Vlad, did not have a big army.
No,
we
weren't expecting that to happen.
Yeah, we had some skeletons, some zombies, and then we got ambushed by the most meager little force, and I had to take control of the battle and try to fight it myself.
See, I think this is the point in which I was totally and completely sold on this game, because it was such a moment, such a beautiful little part of our story where we were ambushed by fucking rats.
Yeah.
We were going through the valley and we were like, oh, we're marching our troops over here to kind of menace the dwarves. That's our strategy. And suddenly it was like, guess what, motherfucker? Your rats are all over the place. And it was really exciting.
Yeah, it was fantastic because it eventually came so far down to the wire. The Skaven have normal leadership mechanics. They have low leadership, so they get scared easily, which is great for being vampires.
Yeah. You just go bleh.
Yeah. But it means that they will often run away, scurry back, fight another day when we're vulnerable. That's something they love
I remember
doing.
that being more of a factor in Warhammer 2, was that the Skaven were everywhere.
Yeah.
And it was like, every time we wanted to go to any like unoccupied town, you'd be like, well, there might be Skaven there. They could be running around in the walls.
Yes, that's precisely what happened, I think, in the end. Whereas the vampires have this kind of like crumbling binding mechanic.
Yeah.
The very last rungs of that battle was everyone's binding falling fast. Everyone was crumbling. I had to kind of cluster all of my units together that were all flagging and dying into one big blob around Vlad and continuously cycle charged with infantry into the Skaven that I could find. It was like a spiral of ants of them swirling in this maelstrom of panic and despair. A bunch of crumbling skeletons and Skaven that were screaming in terror until eventually the Skaven finally broke and we won that battle with so few units left. There was like nothing left.
Yeah. Like it was truly a Pyrrhic victory. Like we won, but at what cost?
Yeah. I think this was back when my computer wasn't very powerful at the time because I by accident left the unit size onto small. So when I say we had very few units, I mean like we had 7 skeletons and Vlad. Whereas these battles are used to having hundreds and hundreds of guys running around.
A true battle of Thermopylae, but it's rats and vampires.
It really was. And
can you just imagine a vampire kicking a rat down a well?
That would be. I would love 300 in the Warhammer universe. That would be so good.
I also just want to take a moment to point out that during the entire time Connor has been talking about the battles, I've done this real like lean forward, put my head on my hands, just going like I'm just nodding like yeah.
It's like a little story time. Yeah. Let me tell you another story about the shepherd. But we ended up having this historic victory over the rats.
Oh yeah, they will be sung by our horrible undead minstrels for years to come.
That they will. It's very impressive given that they no longer have voice boxes and throats. They just kind of rattle through their...
Rattle?
Yeah, they rattle through their little bony throats.
They rattle about the rats?
Oh, I love that. That's good.
I'm glad.
Yeah. We took revenge on these Skaven very quickly. We fucked the rats over. We wiped them out.
Although it did divert our resources and attention for longer than would have been preferable, as indicated by our future problems that we had.
Yeah, there was a while where we started to pull Isabella and the main forces back over to the mainland in case the rats became an issue.
That was one of my favorite things about the strategy layer, was the kind of politics and the value of moving armies across the map. And it's like, oh, if we move Isabella from the east to the west, no one's protecting us against the Empire, and if we get attacked then we have no way to defend ourselves.
Yeah, it's why we kept fighting over the village of fucked around and found out.
Yeah, because we had to keep moving Isabella away and then they would take it back and we had to move her back to reclaim it, and it was a real cut and thrust. It was fun.
It was, yeah. Tensions kept rising with the Empire, by the way, and we, although we wanted to go back to that campaign, the Skaven distracted us so much that I think we both kind of lost sight of the overall situation on the map, because at some point we opened diplomacy, and I went, Ash, see if you can confederate with Mannfred, or see if he wants to trade with us. And suddenly there was like a moderate chance he'd confederate, and I was just like, offer him a tiny bit of money, push it into high.
Yeah.
We can get Mannfred. We can get his big, stupid golden castle that he lives in.
Yeah.
We can get his legions of powerful undead. So we confederated with Mannfred. And it turns out the reason why he wanted to confederate was because he decided to push way far up to the north.
Yeah, he basically just carved this very straight, long line into the northern territories for some reason.
Yeah, completely unsustainable borders, nearly at the edges of Kislev, going into the Empire.
Seemingly taken land. Each piece of land was taken from a different faction, making a different faction annoyed at him.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah.
It was like tiny little like blobs that formed this big thin line. It was
absolute waste of our time. Like,
and it pulled us into wars.
Yeah.
And we were just like, we have to cut our losses. But like our economy went from a little bit in the green to totally in the red.
Yeah.
And
well, that was kind of the story of the first campaign, is that we were able to take wide swaths of land for ourselves, but we were never able to consolidate it.
Yeah.
We weren't able to invest in any of those territories. They never really contributed much to our economy. And if anything, they just took away from our ability to grow and to do other things, because we had to keep putting resources into these areas. Like, I remember in the second campaign, we had this massive country that was like the size of an entire continent, and like every town we could like, it was like, it had like a buffer around it of smaller towns, so all of our inner towns we could really, really focus on developing in a way that we couldn't in the first campaign.
Exactly, yeah. I think we had a much better start in that second campaign.
Well, there were no rats, for one. That really helped us out.
It did.
And like, the AI didn't do quite as well in our second campaign.
Yeah. Ultimately, the main thing that we were able to hold on to from Mannfred's Northern Blunder was the small but historically famous two-players town of Mordheim, which we promptly renamed to Tekken.
Tekken, yeah.
I don't know why.
When we got it in the second campaign, we called it Kessen.
Yeah, we called it. I don't know why.
Yeah, that's what you say about every name that I made. I don't think you've got any of them.
No, it just I can't follow your flippin' like warp logic. I feel like it's less that you are this powerful vampire lord, and more like you're one of those fucking Warhammer wizards that just keeps casting spells and pulling perils of the warp upon yourself. You're just like, dude, there's a fucking demon in my head right now.
Yeah, we couldn't figure out what was the connection between many of my regions, like Blue Spain or Galugan Blugenhen or Horrid Man Town.
I don't know what it was called.
There's Havelheim.
Havelheim? That was Averheim.
Yeah, Ringaloo.
Ringaloo?
Ringaloo, yeah.
What the fuck was Ringaloo?
It was Aragon. Yeah, that was a classic.
But the campaign, however, unfortunately ends rather tragically. For we prepare for our war with the Empire in its fullest. We end up declaring war on Reichland, which is the main Empire faction, as well as their allies, start making pretty good headway into their lands as well, with our full armies to bear. And yet, my worst fears happen, and while we are completely off guard with very little to prepare ourselves, the dwarves finally fucking come for us.
Yeah, they do.
They declare war, they take, I think, a couple of towns, and at this point, it's like 10 at night, and we're just like, we'll come back to this another day.
Yeah. I remember because it was like everything that went wrong happened over the course of a single turn.
Yeah.
So it would be like the dwarves have attacked, and then like it would cycle, and then another terrible thing would happen, and you were sitting there just like, no.
Yeah, exactly. I'd just be like, oh god.
Like, we just hadn't built a solid enough foundation to support so many wars. Like, we didn't have enough like industry to fall back on, or enough resources. Like, we just spent so long trying to confederate with fucking Dunsast, Lord Mannfred, or whatever his name was. So we just had no actual. We were like Russia whenever they invade anywhere, where they think they're going to have enough to support this massive country and economy, and then they go, actually, now we've got nothing going on.
Yeah. It was also just a two-front thing. It feels more like we were Japan. We suddenly got invaded once by the Dwarven Soviet and went, no, we're
getting out of here.
We're out of here before
Someone get Harry Truman on the phone.
Before the rats nuke us. But
Harry Truman as a rat would be good.
I would love to see a Skaven in office. Are you kidding me? With his little Harry Truman, like with his glasses, up in the Oval Office,
reading his nuclear weapon book report.
Oppenheimer with Skaven is a film I want to see.
Oh yeah,
get on it, one of you, please. I beg of you.
One of our viewers,
please. Fast forward 2 years.
Yeah.
And Ash, who has come back to me on this a couple times, has said, Connor, I really want to play more Total War again. And I say
it's really fun.
Yeah. And because despite our losses, you were having a really good time with the game. As you said,
like, this is a game that I can't play. Like, both in terms of I don't own a PC, and also I'm not smart enough to play it by myself. So, like, this is my only avenue into actually being able to play this video game.
Yeah, which is fair. Although I had to keep pushing you back because I kind of said to you, hey, well, at this point, Total War Warhammer 3 is out. And I feel like we should wait until we have the next Mortal Empires out.
With all the factions. Yeah. That's the only one that I was interested in.
Yeah. I'll take a quick tangent to say that, yes, there are story campaign maps on this, and there is one for Total War Warhammer 3 as well, but I'm just not as into them.
No.
They're objective-based and...
No, they don't interest me at all. Like, for me, the red-hot appeal of this game, the very core of it that I find exciting is that there are so many factions on the map. That's what makes it interesting.
Yeah. Total War Warhammer 3s as well wouldn't have even have had the vampire counts in it. It would have been entirely focused on Kislev, on Cathay, which is the China faction,
Lame.
Chaos, and the Ogre Kingdoms, which... The ogres are fun, but they are definitely not your vibe.
I want to be a sexy vampire.
Yes, so we waited until Immortal Empires, to which we opened up that map, and were very pleased to see that there was no sign of Piss Boy Manfred and his big, bald, stupid head.
They just seem to simplify the vampire starting location to just be, you are the one vampire faction.
Yeah.
But unless the Rotep was still running around, getting up to no good.
Yeah. Manfred always says this line where he goes, "More sleep shines." More sleep being this big moon that's in the sky. And he's got a big, dumb, white, bald head like a moon. I just imagine him being like Moonface now. But we decided to start on our second campaign, where instead of having to immediately go up to the crotchety old man in Tempelhof, who's stealing away all of our fine wines and money, instead we had to deal with some vampiric rebels that had taken over the historic Castle Drakenhof, the heart of Sylvania and of the Vampire Empire. We were still in Schwiggenborfdorf, but we were like, fuck it.
Never want to leave Schwiggenborfdorf.
We're going to go after these guys. Isabella rocks up with Vlad and with Melissa Retep, rocks on over, kicks the rebels' ass, and takes over Castle Drakenhof to rename it into the now historic and prestigious GoldCastlePartyTown?
Dude, GoldCastlePartyTown is such a fucking jewel in the crown of the Vampire Emperor, man. Like, it's way cooler than Silver Castle Serious Business. It's just the destination for partying vampires.
We did very well among the vampires because they all wanted to come over and party. The vampire courts all assembled.
You listen, every single one of you would love to go to GoldCastlePartyTown. Like, it's a fantastic location.
I'd go there.
So many channel pits.
So many. That's the real appeal.
Huge piles of burning hay.
Yeah, it just reeks out there.
Yeah, it's a party, man. It's a party town.
But thankfully, with the resources that we got from GoldCastlePartyTown, because it's built atop a literal gold mine, like, hot damn.
There you go.
Yeah.
See, I know what I'm doing.
Yeah, which for some reason we then turn into dark magics, so...
Whatever.
Figure that one out.
We go to what are they called? The Bureau du Exchanges? You know, where you get your money changed into foreign money?
Yeah. And we rock up to Tempelhof, kick the old man's ass, rename it to Silver Castle Serious Business.
Oh, yeah, man.
And then found the historic towns of Isabella von Carsteinville?
That one was good, yeah.
And Blue Spain.
Blue Spain, dude. Blue Spain. Why did I call it Blue Spain?
I don't know. You tell me.
Like, I'm trying to remember and trying to unlock the code in my brain that explains why I call these things. But I just called it Blue Spain.
Well,
there's Herm.
There was Herm.
Glugenblugenham.
Glugenblugenham is the heart of our new empire.
Exactly, yeah. It's a beautiful location. It's prime real estate.
It's a cultural standpoint.
They are really important bulwarks against the Western French people, like Snake Ass Pass and Fort Burgertown.
Dude, the fact we never ended up having a battle for Burgertown was a huge disappointment.
Yeah. Oh, and in the second campaign, when we took the moot, I called it Definitive Moot.
Definitive Moot, because it was ours.
It was. We finally took it, and it was right next to Get Bitches. And the Iron Bank of Mood.
What the fuck? At this point, without Manfred, we had to consider who our allies were going to be. There were the orcs that we had some kind of...
Oh, I love the orcs.
Yeah, we had some, mutual enemies, so we could get along with them decently well. There was a particular orc faction I really wanted us to find called the Bone Rattlers.
I think we did know where the Bone Rattlers were. I remember them being on that map.
But we kept trying to negotiate with them and they turn us down, which the whole point of the Bone Rattlers is that they are meant to be influenced by vampires. That's a big faction debuff for them.
Well, I think we had crossed the Russians, and so our reliability was quite low at a certain point because we forgot we had a pact with them and then we invaded them.
Isabella, we can't show weakness in front of the Russians. So instead, our main ally at that point in time was someone that you initially wanted to wipe out, but I kind of advised against it, which was a wood elven faction called the Wargrove of Woe, led by a weird tree woman called Dryka, who just fucking hates civilization.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. I mean, she took one look at GoldCastlePartyTown and she was like, that's not right.
Yeah. Realistically, she should hate our guts. She should hate the fact that we are killing the woods and killing everything, but she seems to hate the Empire more, so we kind of struck a deal to be like, you know what? go do your thing, Dryker.
Well, we kind of gave her free reign in the north to just sort of take sporadic towns. Like, she would just, like, run around and take, like, a few of the towns from Kivlev and then be like, well, that's my job done.
Yeah.
You guys be down there. And I can only imagine that she's sitting with her council of advisors and they're all like, all right, Drachma, listen, sweetie, honey, the vampire nation is gigantic. It's the strongest army in the world. Can we please impede them in some way? And she's like, oh, they're just having fun down there. Have you been to Party Town? It's wonderful. Well, we became a China-sized continent.
We did.
Yeah.
And yeah,
I think we were leading up to, when we go back to that, my strategy is I want to take out Drachma after defeating the Empire.
Yes. We will talk more about our intentions there in the future.
I got big plans.
Yeah. But with Dryker kind of satiated and us presuming that the dwarves were still going to wait around for a bit about down by the south.
Yeah, the dwarves gave us no trouble in that campaign.
No.
Not thus far, at the very least. Like,
No.
they've been content with their lot at the moment.
Yeah, it's the same with the rats. I think the dwarves are focused on the rats.
Probably,
I think
yeah.
that's what happened.
Finally, we've marshaled the Skaven to work to our benefit.
Yes! So we just focused again on the Empire. We took down Stirland with relative ease.
Oh, it was so gratifying. It was beautiful. When Stirland was wiped from the map and we killed Thaddeus von Stevenberg or whatever, and I was just sitting there like, yes. And Tobaccoland is mine.
And in the greatest moment of just a real spit in the face, a real salt in the wound moment, we renamed their prestigious capital from Wurtbad to What Bad.
It's what space bad question mark or something like that. Like, it doesn't make any sense.
What bad?
What bad? Yeah. The disrespect on it.
Yeah, really just...
We were not a magnanimous army.
The biggest spit in the face in any motion.
Yeah.
Any historic motion.
What were they going to do about it? Their faction was gone, Connor. Their people were consigned to the dust, to the history books. They were a footnote in our conquest. What could they do about it? Nothing.
Exactly. Absolute.
It was very satisfying in a way that I'm kind of loath to admit, because it's just like we killed all of their wives and their children, and we took everything from them. We raised their corpses to conscript into our army, Connor. It was beautiful.
It was beautiful, and we were frowned upon by a particularly prestigious member of the Empire, his name being Balthasar Gelt, leader of the Golden Order, the Grand Theogenist and
I forgot about him.
And Wizard of Metal. He died like a putz.
Yeah, he didn't put up much of a fight.
He's one of the big meme figures in the community because people like using his loadouts and things to basically turn every war map into Vietnam.
Oh, okay.
But we took him down easily, and I think all we did was we just took his capital and just gave it the same name but backwards.
Oh yeah, Trasniets.
Yeah, we took Steingart and turned it into Tragniets.
Well, I think the problem was that he had moved his army away from his capital, and then we took his capital, so we had no economy and couldn't maintain his army anymore.
Yeah, his army just kind of starved out. It started deserting. They did one final battle against us, and we just wiped them out.
Asses, yeah.
I think this was at the same point where we took one of their last bastions that wasn't part of their heartland. They went into some mountain to go and take
hang out.
Just hang out. And that was when I looked at that and realised, ooh, Ash, we might be overextending ourselves here, which sounds like, sacrilege, but it was the fact that I saw walking around another Wood Elf army led by Durthu, who's another big fuck-off tree man. And I was like, Ash, Durthu's not someone we want to be fucking with. Maybe we should just give him the settlement and just let him...
And what did we call it?
You can have it.
Yeah, the wonderful town of You Can Have It.
The wonderful town of You Can Have It, which was our little parlay with the Wood Elf. Just, again, they really just weren't thinking about it. This was a real Treebeard moment. We were our fucking Saruman Isengard, chopping down trees, bringing death to the land, and then just sitting there being like, well, I don't know, they're not at us yet.
Wasn't the metal guy, what was his name?
Balthasar Gelt.
Balthasar. Wasn't he the guy who, took one of the forts in the mountains?
Yes,
and then we had to march on the fort, and then we renamed it Fort Burger Town?
I think that was Fort Burger Town, yeah. The problem is that beneath Fort Burger Town was just ogres.
Yeah.
Ogres,
they seem like nice guys.
Yeah, they tend to work for gold more than anything.
Yeah.
So we could just placate them, and we just let them fuck around.
Because that's when we also
dwarves.
became aware of the French.
Yes.
Because they were on our western side, beyond the mountains, beyond Snake Ass Pass.
Champagne sauce. Yeah, we were just... they were next on the fucking chopping block.
Oh, when we get back to the game, they are next.
Yeah.
We have to march... Currently, we have to march north to finally, cut off the head of the Empire, I think. And then we have to go back to the west to fight the French.
That we do.
And that's where... What are those guys called? The Barrow Counts?
Oh, the
There's
Barrow
there's
Legion.
there's a shitty ass vampire legion down there who are fighting the dumbest, worst war against the French that they can't possibly win. But they're keeping them distracted. So we're like, this is the thing. This is our Iran-Contra affair, where we're financing the French army so that they can defeat the Barrow Counts, so we can then weaken the French.
Yeah, we want to confederate with them. So by weakening them, we're just funding the French to do that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's been very good.
Like we opened up the diplomacy menu and just secretly gave 5,000 dark energy to the French. Like, don't tell anyone about this.
Shh. That's fun. I like the politicking you can do in this kind of game.
And every time we talk to anyone, they go, "Speak plainly, you vile wretch!" And it's like, dude, listen.
At this point, my fears of the dwarves were still fresh in my mind after the first campaign. And I was like, Ash, we need to do something about the ones that we have nearby. So we declared war on the dwarven kingdom of Zufbar. Marching in with relative ease, there were no rats in the way.
Oh, this is the part where they just kept... There was that guy, right? And he kept just marching from town to town, backwards and forwards, doing nothing.
Yeah.
And we kept watching him on his turn, just being like, what's his plan? Like...
He was in marching distance of GoldCastlePartyTown, but he didn't go for it.
Because this is when we had split our armies, right? This is when we had Isabella von Carstein off to the west fighting those wars, and then we had our two smaller armies, whose names... I think it's Theobald Regak and someone else.
Yeah. Theobald Regak, who was just a randomly generated lord, ended up being our second in command.
Yeah.
We had Vlad for a bit, but the difference between Total War Warhammers 2 and 3 is that Vlad is a full-scale lord alongside Isabella.
Yeah.
Whereas in Warhammer 3, they just make him... Vlad and Isabella are part of the same faction. If you pick one, the other becomes a hero.
Oh, okay.
So when we're playing Isabella, we could have had Vlad running around assassinating leaders and breaking walls for us if we ever had to do sieges. But we just embedded him into armies and just had him fight shit, because that's his better use. He's like one of the most powerful foot lords in the game, so it's like, we basically have two lords in one army.
Yeah. This is the point where we had consolidated our territory enough that we could have like 4 standing armies and have them in different parts of the world doing different things.
Yeah. And because of that, we were able to finance an army that could break through the armor of the dwarves, lots of Graveguard with great weapons, and we were able to take Zufbar with relative ease, renaming their historic capital to Chewbacca.
Alright, my names are stupid, but the dwarf ones were all terrible. None of them were very funny.
Yeah. I think we sort of like ended up having this sort of two-front war. It was the first time we'd managed to do one of these things and managed to go with relative ease. For instance, with the dwarves, we claimed them, gave them silly names, and that was mainly because I was heartbroken that the Bone Rattlers had been wiped off the map.
Yeah.
When that little pop-up came up in the corner to say the Bone Rattlers faction has been destroyed, I was like, no.
But that's one of the things we haven't talked about, is that whenever you finish your turn, it has to like go through the turns of all 270 other factions in the game.
Yeah.
And the thing that was always fun about it was that like the number would start going down, and it was like, oh god, who just was wiped off the face of the earth there, and you'd watch all the people do all their dumb things, like Durthu would just move up and down, and the Bone Rattlers would run around.
We also changed Wissenland into Successville.
Successful. We were having a good time at the time, I think. I think we were really winning.
Yeah, and the city of Nuln into Kissenberg.
Kissenberg, yeah. Well, Henry Kissinger was in the news, so...
Oh, was he?
Yeah,
I guess it would have been...
He's very old.
He is very old.
Yeah.
He was in Futurama. After a week, we slept it off, went back to our campaign later, where we ended up actually going into a little bit more diplomacy. Dryka was fucking around. She was running around everywhere. She was able to take things, but she was losing them, so we needed a new ally. That was when the rats turned up. Clan Mulder from the north had just been doing some damage to Kislev, which is the Russian faction, and it turns out we had a lot in common. So we decided to placate the rats, say, you know what, turn the north into a wasteland.
Yeah.
Just let us have our fun.
We'll come back for it later.
Yeah, we'll come back for it later and kick the shit out of you, you smelly rats.
They weren't the smelliest people running around, though. I'll tell you that much for free.
Oh, Christ, yeah. We'll get to the Feckendites. But at this point, we had enough money, enough prestige, and enough armies that we just were like, you know what? We've dealt with most of the Dwarven kingdoms. Even if the main faction, who's currently dealing with the Orcs, ends up finally beating them, so much of their heartland is gone that we don't...
I had felt we had created sufficient buffer space in the mountains that we could at least defend them if we needed to, you know?
Yeah.
It wasn't like we were pushing into the mountains. We were now nestled in them.
Yeah, this was our golden timeline, or our dark magic timeline, I don't know. Yeah. And as a result, we were able to take a full campaign against the Empire, where we faced off against Emperor Karl Franz I,
Never been
Protector of the Empire, Defier of the Dark, Sigmar's heir, Emperor of the South, Emperor himself, and son of emperors.
Kind of sucked.
Yeah, he died like a bitch.
Yeah, he went down pretty easy.
It's a damn shame. I love Karl Franz. I feel like outside of the context of being a Warhammer fan, he just kind of comes across as like a guy who yells a lot. But I find there's something about his voice acting is like Dawn of War levels of iconic to me.
Yeah.
Like, he's got such a great inflection and delivery of his lines. There's loads of times where you'll just select him. If you're not his same faction, you'll select him, and he'll just go, "This action does not have my consent." And he talks of such like a... I just imagine him pouting like a child every time he says it. And I find it so... I find him so funny.
Yeah.
I love Karl Franz. He's one of my favorites to play in the outer campaigns otherwise. But Reichland was just not that well defended. It was...
And like I've been saying all along, we had done such a good job like consolidating all of our resources. So we had so much money each turn, and we could build massive armies and be in every region of the land with our armies. Like, it was impossible to resist us at a certain point.
Yeah. Earlier into the campaign, I'd actually regretted us picking the easy difficulty because we were turning this into a stomp.
Yeah.
With your energy of just wanting to drive into these conquests and me giving you the strategic advice in order to get things working properly and maintaining that campaign, the game stood no chance.
Yeah.
I was sort of heartbroken. I wasn't able to fight many battles during the campaign.
Yeah, our second campaign, we fought one real battle, and we only did it so Connor could fight a single battle.
Yeah.
Who was it? Were we fighting the Fecundites, or was it the Empire?
We were fighting the Fecundites,
Oh,
which, yeah, they were kind of one of the big things the Empire was dealing with at that time. They had laid waste to the north. The Fecundites are a Chaos faction. I think they were the newest DLC at the time that we were playing.
I mean, they were an existential threat to our very stability and our very ambition, because they had a alternative form of corruption, which was seemingly smearing poop everywhere.
Yeah, we kept getting plagues, which, how the hell do plagues affect?
Isabella got sick.
It was like, you're a vampire.
What's going on there?
Yeah, like what the hell's going to happen to you? But ultimately, just out of principle, that was worth just trying to deal with them when we could.
I believe the actual conversation I had was that, you were saying that fighting them wasn't necessarily that important, and I was like, I don't care, I don't want them here anymore.
Yeah.
Like, they're ruining my beautiful empire, I want them gone from this land.
Yeah.
They're just so... bleh.
If anything, I think I made a mistake with him. At some point in that campaign, we had made a non-aggression pact with him, and we decided to declare war, and it tanked our reliability.
Yeah.
So suddenly the Barrow Legion wasn't interested in confederating with us anymore.
That's why we had to fund the French.
Yes, that was legitimately why, because we were like, we got nothing to lose at this point. And a lot of our allies, although they still liked us, they were reluctant to do any more business with us. Which was a damn shame. But we mostly succeeded in our goal of wiping out the Empire. Only a few sort of like straggling
he has a
factions.
northern bulwark, which we're currently marching towards, but we're dealing with our shit war right now.
Yeah, and even then, that's the side of the Empire that in the canon is constantly being assailed by chaos, so it's kind of weird that probably the least well-off part of the Empire is the bit that's left. It's they got no fucking chance. But at that point...
because we were originally intending to have Isabella march to fight the Fecundites, and then we were positioning Theobald, who was in... Oh, I had a really bad name. It was $$ Keep. That's where he was stationed.
Why did you call him?
I don't know, man. Listen, all right, leave me alone. Well, the intention was that we were going to march him on the Empire and then kill two birds with like two stones. But I guess that's all I'm saying. But then eventually, when we got to fight the Fecundites, they actually crushed us.
Yeah.
But they were really powerful, so we have to march. That's our next move, is marching Theobald up to that fight.
So it's very funny. I want to talk about this. We didn't get very far in our Total Warhammer 2 campaign. But when you get to a certain point in that game, it's usually when you end up with like 40 settlements, suddenly it triggers the end times to happen, where a big army of chaos comes in from the north, which is opposed to pretty much everyone, and starts wrecking shop.
Yeah.
So the funny thing about that is that to anyone who knows how to play that game, they're not that hard to deal with. It's kind of a big letdown, really, as far as the end times is concerned, and it's the focus I want to do in the next video I make, is to talk about the kind of flaccidness of the Chaos end times in that game, and how it's kind of ironic, given that the actual canon ends with the end times being just demolishing. Chaos and the Skaven and everyone demolish the forces of order. So with Total War Warhammer 3, they completely reworked it. They now have different scenarios for their end times to happen. Like, it can be just... the dwarves have had enough. Every dwarven faction gets buffed, all their heroes respawn, they have massive armies everywhere across the world, and they start reclaiming everything. Same can happen for the Wood Elves, the Skaven, the Vampire Counts, the Tomb Kings, all this kind of stuff. Weirdly, though, Chaos doesn't have one.
Oh.
Which I'm like, why? The real reason why is because everyone got sick of it in Warhammer 2. But it would have been nice to have seen it.
Yeah,
I think it's just the way that they went with it. But we're not quite at that point yet. But I suspect that we are artificially making a chaotic end times right now. By wiping out the Empire, and presumably the Orcs are doing quite well against the Dwarves in the south and everything, Chaos in the north is now getting a lot stronger.
Yeah.
The Fecondites have been our first proper challenge in this campaign for a long, long while. And I suspect that Norska, Khorne, Tzeentch, Slaanesh, and then eventually...
They got Khorne up in this shit?
They got Khorne up in this
Jonathan
shit.
Davis going, ah!
Is Khorne the one that goes, ooh, ah?
No, that's Disturbed. Khorne
Damn
is the
it.
one who goes, bow, ba, ba, dow, ba, da, bu, da, bu, da, bu, da. Yeah.
Oh, Jesus. That's the thing with this campaign, is we've still got a few stragglers to go. And we are wanting to return to this campaign.
Oh yeah, I'm very much looking forward to going back to it, because it's we played about like 2 hours of it before we recorded the podcast in our usual fashion, and the whole time I was just like, this game is so much fun, I want to play more of this. Like,
I think that's the first case in the list where we've had a game like this. Most of the time we get to end credits and we're done, but Total War Warhammer isn't that same kind of game.
It's a forever game.
I guess it is until you have literally every province, but no one ever plays that far.
Yeah.
But leave a comment if you have. And
Get in touch. Let us know what you named Kesson.
and tell me what faction that you played as well, actually, because
I thought there was only one faction in the game.
Oh, what, the Vampire Counts?
Yeah, seemingly from my experience.
Well, I remember you were umming and erring about going for Cathay, but then you were like, nah.
I want to be a vampire. It's so much fun.
Yeah. But, yeah, that's kind of where our story for Total War Warhammer ends, and I have to say, goddamn.
Yeah.
I fucking love this game.
It's a really fun game. Even me, who is a complete Warhammer, like a completely opposed to Warhammer in every degree, was having a really good time with it. Like this is the closest I've come to liking Warhammer. This is the game that kind of cracked that nut for me.
Yeah. Warhammer 40k was more of my interest.
Yeah.
I wanted to collect fantasy at a point, but I decided against it in the end. And I'm so glad that Total War Warhammer came around to reinvigorate this interest in the old world, because ever since what happened with If the Emperor Had a Text-to-Speech Device and me kind of distancing myself from 40k a bit more, or at least modern 40k, I just don't care to support the modern stuff. I look upon the old world now as a kind of fresher, newer setting to me.
Yeah.
And I love that this game has kind of inspired that and kept me engrossed in Games Workshop IPs, because, you know, as a kid, I was one of those generic collectors where I would want to just collect Space Marines. I later pivoted to Imperial Guard, but I was very much into these Forces of Order factions. But even at that age, when I looked at Warhammer Fantasy, it was like, cool, if I ever do this, what do I want to do? Fucking Chaos.
Yeah.
They look rad. But initially, I was very surprised to find out that the Vampire Counts were in the base game, whereas Chaos were DLC. Because I thought, what the fuck? Chaos is so important to Warhammer's identity. Why isn't Vampire Counts the tertiary bonus faction? Because they don't seem that important. No, they're absolutely important to the identity of that world.
Yeah.
They're a huge part of it, both geographically, but also they're a huge part of its vibe.
They're a huge part of it to me.
Yeah.
They're my favourite Warhammer faction. Isabella von Carstein is my Warhammer stan.
She is a queen.
She is. She's slay.
We'll get the Isabella fan cam going up.
Yeah.
And I just wanna kind of wrap this up by just saying that this is one of those games where I keep playing it repeatedly. There's many campaigns I've not actually gotten to an ending victory on, but there's so many factions I love to play.
I believe, Connor, that we can award Warhammer 3 the dizzying plaudit of your favourite game of 2022.
It is my favourite game of 2022.
Higher than Soul Hackers 2 and Stranger of Paragon.
Listen, it's a toughie.
It was a big year.
We all love Jack Garland, but well, that's another thing, is that when I think about it, it's not that important to anyone but myself, but the other two Total War Warhammer games were kind of snubbed in terms of being my favourites.
Yeah, because the second one, or the first one, came out when XCOM 2 came out, right?
Yeah, XCOM 2 was my favourite game of that year.
And then when did Warhammer 2 come out?
Warhammer 2 came out in 2017. So
was that Fire Emblem Echoes?
Yeah, it was tied with Fire Emblem Echoes and XCOM 2 War of the Chosen. It was very difficult for me to be like, which of these three do I like the more? But Echoes is a very special game to me, and and if anyone has ever listened to me return to sender, I don't shut up about that fucking game.
You're not a Final Fantasy XIV Stormblood fan?
Never touched it, I'm afraid. Eventually, when I finally get into MMOs.
Oh yeah, it's not like when you played World of Warcraft and you said that it was the worst time you've ever had with a game to me.
Okay, maybe not the worst time, but I did not like World of Warcraft.
You did not like the Kobold Mines.
Even if I kind of like the vibes of the worlds.
Yeah, I think the aesthetics of World of Warcraft are kind of fun.
Yeah.
Those elves have really weird eyebrows.
Yeah. I think that would be my thing, is that I should just start playing the Warcraft RTSs.
Yeah, I think you'd like those.
That's absolutely up my alley.
You could be a really big dumb orc.
Yes!
His name is Frau.
But
my boss at work was talking to me about Frau for like a half an hour the other day. She was just like, I asked her about the Warcraft movie, and she was like, they just misinterpreted Frau. He's the most important character in the Warhammer fiction. The Warcraft fiction. And I was like, all right, whatever, man.
Oh my god. Okay. You know what? I've heard one other person say that, and it's fucking Scott McNeil, who's the guy in Dawn of War who voices everyone. Like, I remember... Oh, right. I'm doing a me thing again. Where I'm talking about something only I like.
I mean, I'm talking about Final Fantasy Stranger Origins, so fucking you do what you wish.
That's true, but Jack Garland is the funniest man ever made.
He is the funniest man. Everyone who's watching this video, repost if you would kill Chaos.
I only care about one thing,
and that's
killing Chaos,
exactly.
Which is what we're going to have to do.
Gather at our house with your Geo crystals, and we'll come together and we'll kill Chaos. Google search Jack Garland Geo crystal and come back to me.
Jack Garland, the ever-chosen, will be our foe for another day. I think...
No, don't say that. We haven't played Final Fantasy Origins Stranger of Paradise.
Damn it, you're right.
Yeah, the game was like 30 hours long, so...
I can't set that precedent.
No.
Do we want to take a brief moment to just slightly address, given the time that this is releasing, Creative Assembly sort of imploding?
Yeah, I was really excited for Hyenas, as we all are.
So anyway, thank you for listening to the podcast. I don't know.
See, I'm coming from the weird niche where, for me, the Creative Assembly game of note is Alien Isolation.
Yeah, Halo Wars 2.
Yeah.
But it's a shame. I mean, I know someone who worked on Hyenas, and it's a damn shame that people got laid off and that all that work got scrapped. But
I mean, it's a great year for games, terrible year for the people who make games.
Yes, that's a pretty good way of putting it, to be honest. Because I don't know why they did that. It just seems like a really
like mismanagement to the highest order. Like, it just makes no sense.
Yeah,
I guess the sad thing is that Sega would rather close Creative Assembly than let them make games that don't make all the money.
Exactly. That makes me really worried about the future of Total War Warhammer, as well as any future Total War games that they might be making. Because I think I mentioned briefly about Total War Saga Troy and Three Kingdoms and these kind of things, the non-Warhammer stuff, but it seems like they're pivoting in the direction of doing more hero-based stuff that's like Total War Warhammer that not many people are buying and particularly care about.
It seems like a lot of them come out. And I'm not sure, like, maybe this is me speaking as someone who's not interested in the genre, but I don't know if you need that many of them.
No, I think that it says a lot that the best-selling ones in the series are the ones that cover much broader periods of time. Like Rome and Medieval are the two big ones. People have wanted a Medieval 3 for so long.
How did East Anglia do?
East Anglia?
Where you've got to conquer the different regions of East Anglia.
You know, I think I actually did that once when I was a kid.
Excellent,
Yeah, there was a Viking expansion for Medieval Total War 1, and it has Northumbria, East Anglia,
hell yeah,
all of these little places.
Put Cambridgeshire in their place.
Damn right. That was good fun as a kid.
I just want to invade Suffolk. I've wanted that every day of my life.
We've been trying to annex Lowestoft into the great empire of the list goes on for a long time.
And we will succeed with your support.
That we will. Please follow us on Patreon to fund our war efforts.
Our Patreon
so that we can raise more skeletons. Things just seem to be quite rough for Creative Assembly at this point. And I want to briefly address the sort of weird gameplay stuff with the prospects of future Total War games. Because Warhammer's super popular. I believe that Total War Warhammer has actually brought and revived the series for Total War, like back from the brink. I legitimately think it would have stagnated without this game. But there are a lot of people who would disagree with me on that. Mainly because, in me saying that, what they think that I'm saying is, games that are about powerful hero units that pretty much dominate the meta of these games, that's the way forward for Total War. Which isn't
that's
strictly...
sweet MOBA juice.
Yeah, which isn't I don't agree with. I do like the way that heroes are shown in Total Warhammer, but I want that to remain its own thing.
Yeah.
I like the idea of things like Three Kingdoms existing that have an emphasis on it, but I would prefer if we had to contrast it more medievals, more Romes, more shoguns, games that are more about the smaller fundamentals. I have seen some people very pretentiously say that the older Total Wars were gameplay Total Wars, whereas the newer Total Wars are push button to win. Because there are some heroes that you can click one button to do a powerful ability and you just rout everyone and you win, which I think my response to that is most of the time people are doing that. It's against AI and game AI isn't that.
Yeah.
It's
like, let people have their fun.
If you've been playing Total War for 15 years, you're going to be outsmarting your computers. I don't know. That's maybe a little bit hand-wavy of me, but that's how I feel on the matter. It's just not looking good. There's been controversy with the Steam forums that people have been getting banned for criticizing the hyenas and layoffs, and also the DLC getting more expensive.
Yeah.
There's loads of DLC for these Warhammer games because it's a big world, more factions get added, and they're getting more and more expensive, which people are saying, hey, this isn't a great deal anymore, which has been an issue for a while. And all I want to say is that I am glad that at the very least we've had a really solid trilogy of Total Warhammer games.
Yeah, this is kind of my question to you when you discuss things like this. Is that is there anything that you need to see in a Warhammer 4? Are there things they're missing that you would like for them to add? Surely by this point they've kind of covered all their bases, surely. I
believe that they have. There's smaller factions they could do, there's little things here and there. The problem is that most of them are just more factions that are based on real-world places. We could make the Kingdoms of Ind a faction. But I do think that most of the truly creative juices in this world have now been poured out into this beautiful broth of a game. And I could drink merrily from it for a long, long time. I'm fine with how we have things now.
Yeah.
Maybe a few extra characters, if they can do some more free updates for smaller heroes, some balance patches, keep going, but this is fine. I'm ready for you guys to make Napoleon 2, Empire 2, to make Medieval 3, Shogun 3, just,
I'm just nodding now, I'm like, yeah.
Yeah. And that's just kind of my piece on it. This is a very me-led podcast, I do apologise, but...
That's fine, the one before this was Haunting Ground.
That's true.
Where I was like, Connor, you can run around this castle and nothing happens. It's fantastic.
I'm like, oh, it's Huey.
Where is he?
He's a dog.
He's beautiful.
I suppose it's worth us getting to our final thoughts. Ash?
This game's fun.
Yeah.
I have no investment in the universe, and I'll never play this game by myself, but I had a really good time with it. It's an experience in games that I've never had before, and that I'm going to very much treasure for the rest of my life. It really spoke to me in a weird kind of way.
Yeah, I love this game. I love playing it co-op, and I love just revisiting it over and over. So, let's get onto rankings.
Yeah, sure.
In terms of the quality of this game, where would you put this?
It's a very high quality product. And it's polished to a sheen. It's wonderful looking. It's got great gameplay. This is weird. I feel like I'm rattling off the specifications of a car or something like that, where I'm talking about it quite objectively and without any real passion, because I do have passion for this game, but it's not my genre, it's not my setting, it's not really my vibe, so I can't speak too excitingly about it. So I'd put it high middle.
Okay, so for me, this is top.
Better than Geist?
I'm afraid so. I would say this is in my top 3 at the very least from what we've played in this game.
Yeah.
I hope to eventually cover the other 2 that are a part of that soon, but we'll get to them when we get to them. I think the list always has its time.
The list will go on.
Indeed, indeed. In terms of interesting, where would you put that?
See, this is one of those things where interesting becomes confusing to me, because it's I think on the face of it, this game is not interesting to me at all. It's another edition in a genre. It doesn't do anything super crazy with that genre. It doesn't do exciting things. I don't think the way it's developed is very interesting, but the game interests me just conceptually. I find it interesting in that sense. So I'm going to say mid, pure middle.
All right, that's fair. That's a very good question for me too. And I think that there's a lot I could say about how this game, which I guess I kind of encapsulate Warhammer 1 into 3 here.
Yeah, we're talking about the trilogy, I suppose.
Yeah, but there's a lot to say about how the game has kind of evolved the Total War genre and how it implements the setting and everything like that. I think if I was talking just about Warhammer 1 in that regard, I probably would put this quite high.
Yeah.
And I love Mortal Empires. I love the way that they brought the map together. Not many games can have so much stuff going on at once in a way that's so compelling. But I guess realistically, I would say probably the higher end of middle.
Yeah, for me, it's very much like Resident Evil 4 or any of the like quote unquote good games that we've played, where it's like it's not interesting because it's weird or wacky. It's just a good game, and I like it for that.
Yeah, it's very solid and competent.
Yeah.
I'm very engrossed by it, but especially considering specifically this is Warhammer 3. This particular trilogy has gone on for 6 years.
Yeah, exactly.
It's sort of, it's running out of steam a bit on it. But in terms of fun,
I had a lot of fun. This game was one of the only games that we've come back to time and time again. So much so that we started an entirely new campaign with the same faction because it was just that much fun the first time around. So I'd say this is very, very high on fun.
Yeah, I put this...
If not the highest.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's either this or like Final Fantasy X was really fun for me. Tulip was not fun, but it was the most fun anyone's ever had in their lives.
Yeah.
Like this is very high.
Yeah, I would put this at high as well. Definitely. I'm not sure if I'd say top, but that's just because, good God, we've covered so much stuff on the list.
Yeah.
And with those hairs split... Oh, geez, what's the time? Oh my God, Ash, we've been here for ages.
Oh no, we're going to have to gather several crystals of unknown origin from different time periods throughout the world.
Oh, Jesus. All right, I guess it's time to split.
Yeah, we've missed our train to Soviet Russia.
To Siberia, huh?
Siberia, yeah.
Oh, man. Is this the worst segue we've done?
Yes.
And it was all led by my ridiculous enthusiasm for it.
Yeah, sorry. I've become very not as a critique of this game. I've just become very sleepy during this podcast.
This is the third longest podcast we've done.
Yeah. I'm sitting in my chair. I've got a blanket on. It's the dead of British winter, so I'm just sitting here like
yeah.
We're talking about Time Splitters 2.
Yes, we've jumped ahead on our list to talk about Time Splitters 2 because it's a fucking great game.
Yeah, because we were looking at the list and we were like, we can't do more horror games. Time Splitters 2.
Yes, absolutely.
We don't want to talk about Modern Warfare 3 for the Wii just yet. So, Time Splitters 2 is going to have to be.
I'll take that. That sounds like a great time. In which case, then, thank you very much for listening, everyone.
Yeah, thank you for being very patient with this one because it's a kind of game in a format that we've not done before, and we're also very tired.
Yeah.
So it might not be our finest work, but I think we're still proud of what we've got out today.
I definitely am. I mean, I fucking love this game, and I hope that everyone's enjoyed listening to us talk about it.
Yeah.
Once more, thank you very much for listening. Ash, do you have anything you'd like to plug?
No.
That's fine. That's no worries. In which case, then, thank you for listening, everyone. If you would like to follow the channel for more of this stuff, feel free to subscribe to the ThunderPsyker channel. That's available on YouTube. We might have this out on Spotify by this point as well.
Oh yeah, we'll figure that out. Yeah.
I got no idea how Spotify follows things at this point, but feel free to listen to more of the podcast.
We'll do the work for you, though.
Damn right.
Yeah.
Damn right.
We're making that promise right now.
And if you want to see more from me, my YouTube channel is ThunderPsyker, which is where I do most of my good work.
Not like here.
No. Hey, I'm proud of what we put out on these podcasts, all right? I love my two beautiful sons that are List Goes On and Return to Sender.
Yeah.
They both get big presents at Christmas. Ash, don't tell the podcast, but the podcast is getting a unicorn.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
They've been very good this year.
When we record on Christmas Day.
When we record Legend of K on Christmas Day.
Yeah, look forward to that one.
That's our present to you all.
You're welcome.
Well, have a fantastic night, but beware for what lurks within it. For it might just be the shadows that lurk between the trees, ever withering within the night. You might see the faint silhouette of bats and skeletons.
Or it might be a really stinky poo guy.
Yeah, it might be the fucking Fecodites, and those guys reek. Don't go near them. Don't give them any money. Don't give them your dark magic.
We're working on that.
Yeah, we are
going to wipe them from these lands.
Damn right, damn right.
We're going to clean the lands.
That we are. A lot of soap.
Yeah.
So, have a fantastic night, and take care.
Make good choices.
Farewell.
Ciao.